Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're going to be talking about Saturn ingressing into the sign of Aries. We're going to go on a detailed deep dive of all of the Aries significations. We're going to give you all sorts of dates associated with Saturn's journey through Aries, at least through 2026. We're going to talk about the host Mars and how it has a relationship with Saturn during this period of time. We're going to talk about some specific moments within the year where we're going to see Saturn making some important aspects. So buckle up and let me know that you're here in the chat. And if you have any questions about Saturn and Aries, put them in the chat here today. We're going to be going on a journey together, spending some time. I hope everyone's doing well out there. We'll welcome some friends here. Rachel Fletcher is here. What's up, Rachel? Nice to see you. Hello from snowy Virginia. Yes, it's definitely snowy out there by us too. Actually, my partner Tanya's out doing the snow blowing outside because I had to work here, and so we're kind of tag teaming the snow here today. But hope everyone's staying warm wherever you're at. Cosmic Rose is here. Says love that. Nice to see you, Rose. Hope everything's going well your way, my friend. Thank you for joining us again today. Devin Malone is here today from Selene's Gateway. Says, hey, Spencer, how you doing? Devin, nice to see you, my friend. Uranus station, and I shaved my head, Devin says. Well, there you go. That's a perfect way to embrace the Uranian energy. He says, you know what? I've got some sweeping changes I need to make, right? Devin, I got to tell you, friend, I might not be that far behind you within that. I'm getting some thinning at the temples, and it may be a little bit, and maybe we'll be in the Bald Astrologer Club, which is not a bad club. I think it's there's some dignity and grace and some Saturnian energy that comes through, kind of the dignified baldness, I guess you could say. So, again, thank you for being here, friend, and maybe we'll be in the club one of these days together. KP is here. What's up, Karen? Nice to see you. Hi, Spencer, and all off to work today, and happy to finally catch you live. Nice to see you, Karen. Hope everything's going well your way down there in Cleveland. I saw, just a quick aside, I saw that your defensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns quit today, Jim Schwartz, a great defensive coordinator, but lots of changes happening in the football lands. But we've got more important things to talk about today, I bet. But Karen, it's nice to see you here today, and it's always lovely to see you in the chat, my friend. Javier is stopping in, says hello. I hope everyone is well. Nice to see you, Javier. I hope you're doing well north of the border, my friend. Mary Sweetie is here, says happy to be here. I'm happy that you're here too, Mary. Hope everything's going well your way, and nice to see you in the chat, my friend. Marcia Lindsay is here, says hi, Spencer. It's cold here on the creek in South Jersey. Looking forward to spending this time here with you. Thank you, Marcia, and thank you for choosing to spend your afternoon here with us. We're going to be talking about probably some challenging topics with Saturn and Aries, but I'm going to do my best to contextualize it and maybe give us a way to look at things where we can take some actions that might bring about the new organization of society that might be a little bit more just, that might be a little bit more fair. What do we do with this energy, Marcia? What do we do with this energy that was desiring to make a new start, to maybe tear some old systems down and to make something new in its place? How are we going to utilize that energy in a way that can be, I think, helpful and contributing to the whole? So thanks for being here with us today. Couple announcements before we keep rolling along here. Of course, we're talking Saturn and Aries today, but you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. Have a couple offerings for you to give you a heads up about. I am a professional astrologer, so if you like what you are seeing here today and you're saying, oh, this guy has some interesting insights, you can get those insights for your own personal natal chart as well. All sorts of interesting things over on the Book Now button at spencermichaud.com. Natal readings, transit readings, all sorts of interesting things to take advantage of over there. I would love to work with you on a one-on-one basis as well. Those are some of my favorite things to do, is work with clients. And I have availability moving into February. So if you're in need of some assistance, you want to get a leg up on the Saturn and Aries energy moving forward and see what changes might be coming for you personally, reach out for a reading at spencermichaud.com. There's also a store at spencermichaud.com. Click on the store button where you can get access to some of my teachings and webinars, especially on the decans. If you like what we're talking about with Aries today, I did a whole deep dive on the decans of Aries that you can purchase at the store. I also did a lovely series with my partner Tanya Andrews called Dignity and Devotion, where we went in great detail into the 7 traditional planets, Saturn included, to help you understand how the planet might be working within the different dignities, domicile, exaltation, but also in its fall and its detriment, like we're going to talk about today, and then how to craft a devotional practice, maybe how to mitigate some of the challenges around that through your own magical practices, electing different planetary elections, etc. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that as well. Speaking of my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews, she has a business, Third Coast Mojo, over on Etsy that you can support. And she's got some really awesome new things that she's listed in the last couple weeks. You're seeing here on the screen Law Keep Away oil that is featuring Mercury and Virgo. Law Keep Away is a traditional hoodoo conjure formula that helps you if you're having to deal with any corrupt forces. Sound familiar? We have some corrupt forces that are roaming around the streets of America right now. This could be something that could be helpful to keep you safe around all of those things, hopefully at least nudge things in the direction that you want them to go in. She also has some beautiful Venus things that she's had listed recently that could be wonderful for Valentine's Day, including Venus and Pisces Come to Me oil. If you're trying to attract interesting things into your life, we want to keep away the things that we don't want, and we want to attract the things that we do want. She also has a beautiful Saturn in Aquarius formulation called Scientific Method. So as Saturn moves into its fall, we might need some extra boost for Saturn energy. We might need to take our time and see the big picture and see things from a 30,000-foot vantage point, even if Saturn in the sky right now might not be in its best position. And then finally, there's also another exalted Jupiter Just Judge offering that is out there right now. If you're having any trouble with the legal system, this can be a way to get things moving in the right direction. It's part of a whole series of exalted Jupiter in Cancer offerings that you can find over there as well. So make sure you take advantage of that. Get a little extra mojo for Valentine's Day. If you're going out on the front lines and standing up for justice and standing up for your neighbors, maybe there's some things that can help you out over there as well. All right, friends. Last but certainly not least, we have a newsletter that you can sign up for if you want to know when new things are being released, if you want to know when I'm going live, if you want to know the song of the week. This week it was Joan Jett's Bad Reputation, kind of a little Saturn and Aries defiance energy that was coming up. But also if you want to know when things are getting released for Third Coast Mojo or when new classes are coming. I have some new classes that are coming in the weeks ahead, so I hope that you'll take advantage of that and sign up. Finally, if you want to support the work that I'm doing here today, you can purchase a super chat while I'm live on YouTube, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and support the channel that way. Really appreciate all of you who are able to do so. This is my only job, and Tanya's only job at this point is Third Coast Mojo. So we could use the support at this point to keep doing this work, and we are able to stay in business through the generosity of folks like you. So hopefully, if you're able, I would be open to receiving help around this period of time as well. But the easiest thing you can do if you aren't in a position to contribute financially is to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. This is the easiest way to support the channel. But just being here and spending time with us and commenting, all of those things can be very helpful as well. All right, friends, those are our announcements. Thank you for your support. We have another friend stopping in here. Oh, it says, let's see. KP says, oh yes, sour grapes for Schwartz since he was passed over from Monken. Yes, exactly. For those of you who aren't hip to this, the Cleveland Browns, a downtrodden franchise of the NFL for many years, although they have a rich history back in I believe the 40s and 50s and 60s, especially with Jim Brown, etc. They fired their coach this year, and the assistant coach was hoping to get the job, and he didn't get it. And he kind of said, peace, I'm out, right? He got passed over for another coach, Todd Monken from the Baltimore Ravens. And now he's looking for a job. A great coach, one that helped another player, Myles Garrett, win Defensive Player of the Year. Karen, I was kind of hoping Jim Schwartz would come be the defensive coordinator for my own Green Bay Packers, but they already hired a guy. So, but I digress. I hope that things go well for you over there in Cleveland, friend. I think that one of the things that I would say that is poignant for this discussion is the Cleveland Browns have problems because they have an owner, Jimmy Haslam, who is, I guess, a billionaire, but makes pretty poor decisions when it comes to wielding his money and his authority. Unfortunately, Karen, he is now part owner of another team that I like, the Milwaukee Bucks, and he's simultaneously driving that franchise into the ground. So we'll talk about the billionaire class today and some of the decisions that they make that might not be in the best interest of the collective. And that is my hopefully smooth enough transition away from sports and into Saturn in Aries. Okay, so today, friends, we're going to talk about the greater malefic in Aries. Its transition into Aries, away from Pisces, a place where it would have been hosted by a benefic planet, Jupiter, in Pisces, and moving into a house that is hosted by Mars, a malefic planet. So this is a shift of dignity, right? So we have Saturn moving into Aries on February the 13th. It's going to be in the first decan of Aries from the 13th of February to the 8th of May. And it is also going to be in its fall. So this is a fancy word for Saturn when it is in a place that it isn't comfortable. Saturn is in its exaltation in Libra, a place of balance, a place of increasing that which is lacking and decreasing that which is excessive. In Aries, it's just all yang, excess. Let's do it now. We'll ask questions later. Collateral damage, crafting laws that are in support of maybe one individual's autocratic desires rather than taking into the account the needs of the collective and the community. That can be very scary. But I also think that there are some hidden benefits to this placement. There's hidden benefits to every placement. I think that one of the things that I was thinking about, reflecting on with Saturn and Aries, as I was doing some research this week, I think Saturn is a planet of consequences. Saturn brings us a rebalancing of the energy that it's moving through. Sometimes it brings us endings. It brings us endings and beginnings. Sometimes Saturn teaches us about death. And I think one of the things that we can look at immediately from Saturn and Aries is that there is a reckoning coming from the over excessive use of force, of yang energy, potentially of the patriarchy. I've been having a kind of a Twitter conversation with someone on Twitter about they sent me an article about the Lord of the Rings, and a really interesting article about how post World War I and World War II, when a certain percentage of men had died, that there was the rise of more democratic and egalitarian governing systems because there were just less men. I'm not sure if that is necessarily the solution, although I can say that reducing the energy associated with excess yang, I think, is appropriate. I think it'd be a pretty tough sell to say, well, you know what we just need on the planet? We just need less men on the planet. That would solve every problem. I think that would be a tough sell. But I also say that I think that increasing the voice of the sacred feminine, I think increasing the equality between the sexes, between the yin and the yang energy, checking the power of excess yang, I think is appropriate for Saturn in its fall in Aries. I think saying, you know what, there's been too much collateral damage that's happened through just this unchecked growth mindset. We need to start taking into consideration the ability to reduce things, to say, how do we come into alignment with the sacredness of nature? How do we come into alignment with that sacred yin energy? And I think that this is something that is very much worth exploration with Saturn and Aries in the house of Mars. So I think that there's all sorts of ways of thinking about these topics that can embrace, they can give us actions where we don't necessarily have to alienate an entire part of the species, that we don't have to necessarily demonize a group of people, whether it's men or women, whether it's people that don't look like us. How do we call people in? How do we say, well, we need to check the energy of that, rather than point fingers at an individual or a group of people? That's the type of energy that I like to try to cultivate on this channel. It's not easy to do. Sometimes we have to call out people who are doing destructive things. I have no qualms about calling out people who hoard too many resources or too much power. I think this is a pretty important thing to do, is to speak truth to power. But how do we do that in a way that can lead to the type of society that we want to create moving forward? Just checking in with the chat here. What's up, KWOW? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Devin says, is unrequited success and hope more profitable? Let's see. Devin says, another great idea from billionaires is it profitable to heal people? Saturn in Aries equals success in spite of challenges. Yeah, I could see that. Rachel says, the way Bezos is ruining my beloved Washington Post, but I know there are bigger fish to fry. Okay. Yeah, Bezos, another billionaire that has hoarded too many resources. And we'll see if I guess the Lord of Karma starts coming for folks like that, for sure. Karen says, we don't need less men, just more emotionally and spiritually balanced one. Karen, that's a great point. And that was my argument that I made in response to that article. I don't think the solution is just eliminating half of the gender population of the universe, right, or of this planet. We saw a graphic novel that explored those themes. It was called Why the Last Man Standing, Why, the letter Y, the Last Man Standing, by Brian K. Vaughan. And there were challenges to that. That was a philosophical exercise and exploration of that idea. But there were challenges to that. And my argument is the same one that you have, Karen, is I suggested potentially reading the Sophie Strand book, The Flowering Wand, which reimagines masculinity so that we're teaching men to be able to think in a different way, to grab onto different stories rather than the toxic ones that they've inherited throughout many generations of history. And this is something that I'm trying to work through even with myself, like as a man, as someone who has inherited roles that we were expected to play. We do have to start telling different stories around that. I would say personally, I've never really felt super in alignment with the roles that have been placed on me as a Cancer sun. There's maybe a little bit more attraction to the sacred feminine, and trying to find my way through those roles with a Cancer sun and a Taurus moon, two very feminine signs. But I think that telling new stories, telling new ways to be masculine that are balanced rather than destructive, right? How do we reimagine ways of governing the world that aren't just based on excessive exponential growth, where a planet can't even support that anymore? This isn't something that this biosphere can even handle any longer. When we have an excess of yang, which we've had for many thousands of years now, the planet is starting to become sick under that excessive yang energy. So how do we check that? How do we start to bring those things back into balance? Oh, Devin says, unrequited success was a Cleveland Browns comment. There you go. Perfect, right? Let's see. Yes, is unrequited success and hope more profitable? Yeah, interesting, right? Interesting. I think it's tough when you're a fan of a franchise that has hope springing eternal, but it's difficulty delivering on that, right? I've gone through that in my sports fandom as well. But yes, it's sometimes a difficult place to be in, where we have to renew our hope time and time again. That might be part of our conversation again today in our analysis of Saturn and Aries. Okay, so Saturn is fall, house of Mars. Let's take a look at the chart. This is when Saturn is going to be moving into Aries. This is February the 13th. of 2026, which is a Friday evening. This is a week from today, basically, when Saturn moves into its fall in the house of Mars. It's also going to be meeting up almost immediately with Neptune. So the way that I'd like to unfold this talk today is I'm going to talk about the different decans of Aries, and then I'm also going to talk about Mars and its time periods where Mars is in a specific sign, because Mars is the host of Saturn, and there's going to be a different flavor to the expression of Saturn in Aries when Mars moves through the different signs. So let's start by talking about Mars in Aries 1. And I love this comment. Karen says, it takes a lot of hopium and alcohol to be a Browns fan. I can relate to that, Karen, as being a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks for a long period of time when they were very, very bad. So I think a lot of us can relate to having something that we've poured a lot of our emotional energy into that didn't necessarily deliver what we had hoped. And that's actually a very good transition for the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we're seeing coming up on the 20th, is pouring hope into structures that really weren't delivering. This is something I've seen in the collective quite a bit lately. We've had, I guess, a slow awakening or descent, I guess, however you might want to say it, into distrust of the systems that we've come to accept as the only way for a long period of time. Over the past few weeks and the unfolding that's happening over the last few months, we've seen people in power, the masks come off, right? We've seen them exposed. We've seen the ruling oligarch class exposed for some of the depravity that they have been participating in. We've seen the idea that systems for the masses are just playing by completely different rules and organizations than systems and accountability for the oligarch class, the billionaire class. It's a completely different set of rules that they've been playing by. And accountability just hasn't really been there. I kind of hope, though, that with Saturn moving into Aries, that people start realizing that accountability starts just through, not only through their own personal actions, but through reclaiming some of the power that they have put into these systems. The assumption that these folks are going to be working in the best interests of the public. I think that is starting to deteriorate. And with Saturn bringing about the destruction of old stories, narratives, of old power structures, of old patriarchal power structures potentially, and dissolving element that comes through Neptune, we can also simultaneously see a rebirth of something new. I've been really diving into new systems of organization, of society, especially economic ones. I truly believe that we need to understand economics to understand all of these actions that are happening in our collective, through our governance, through the way that society is structured, through the narratives and myths that we accept as our reality. So much of it can be traced back to the monetization of common resources shared by a collective of people, and the privatization of those resources, the taking of the commons, whether it's natural resources, ideas, land, etc., and turning it into private property ownership, etc. Now, you may be balking at this, thinking that, oh, well, Spencer's a communist now. And I will also say this, that there are different ways where every single system can have challenging results. When individuals become in charge of large systems, the corruptedness of an individual can really be very difficult. I think what I'm proposing is more, how do we organize society in a way that is more taking into account the natural rhythms of this planet and sustainability of this planet, however that needs to be organized, taking into account the costs of the goods that we make, not only the immediate costs, but the environmental costs, the costs for future generations, These are the types of things that I think a lot of people are starting to take into account right now. In the last few weeks, as Saturn has started to come closer and closer to Neptune and Aries, and as Neptune has started moving into Aries, I've been seeing a lot of actions taken from progressive countries around the world, Scotland being one recently, where Scotland, I believe, codified into law a well-being economy, an economy that is where it is law now to take into account the communal benefit of the economic system, not just for individuals. I also was seeing there was another, oh man, I've got to pull this account up because I was sharing this all. This is all on Instagram. It was through a kind of an economic education type of thing that I was experiencing through Instagram. And this might take me too long to figure this out. But really, the gist of it is countries are starting to say, how do we preserve all of the gifts of this planet, not only for ourselves in this current moment, but for future generations. And that's very different than the way that people have thought or acted in the past around this. In the past, people have acted and thought in what was in the best interest of our immediate needs, and through the vehicle of exponential growth of the money system, turning nature and resources into money. And the carrying capacity of the earth has kind of stalled out with that. So this is one thing that I think is important as we move forward in how do we imagine a new story, a new narrative around all of this? And how do we start telling a new story that isn't necessarily one that's just based on violence, right? I think this is the thing that there's a lot of assumptions being made about Saturn and Aries and Neptune conjunction, that this has to be this grotesquely violent time. There is a possibility for that. The conditions could potentially be ripe for that. But it doesn't have to be like that. I'm going to push back on that and say, what are we going to do while dismantling the old system of violence? How do we start building something different? Let's see. Marietta is here. What's up, Marietta? Nice to see you. Javier says, I still don't understand why the conjunction doesn't happen the minute it hits Aries. Well, I think because there are minutes of degrees in between Saturn and Neptune, Javier. There's 31 minutes of separation. So yes, they are conjunct by whole sign, but the actual physical, like they are exactly conjunct one another, doesn't happen for a couple days after that, because Saturn moves super, super slow. Let's see. Marietta is saying it's still a cover-up. There are people not being revealed. This goes back to Alfred Kinsley and before him. Yes, I'm sure that there's so many layers to all of the things that are going on right now. Devin says it's interesting that Bill Clinton impeachment and the WTO riot was Saturn in Aries, right? Like holding power accountable, holding people who are demonstrating excessive yang and trying to bring that back into balance, right? Marietta is talking about, it goes back to Pharaoh and before him too. I have a 30-pound box of reasons never to trust this government ever again. And then some. Fukushima is a debt no one can pay. Exactly. That's a really great example, Marietta. Is the nuclear reactor meltdown, Fukushima, right? I believe is what you're referring to, where we had nuclear waste just pouring out into the ocean. That's going to be something that we're going to be dealing with for generations to come. And those are the types of costs that we've been trying to discuss on this channel about the internalization of costs. The idea that instead of putting off all these costs on future generations or exporting our violence or our destruction to developing nations, that we have to start thinking about these costs as the developed nations. And what does this mean as in regards to our choices as how we move through our environments? Uh, Devin says, are you familiar with A More Perfect Union? Great videos. Not necessarily. You should send me some of that. Let's see. Javier says, oh, okay, it's not exactly 0 for 0, a few minutes. Yep, there you go. Rachel says, good point. I've been dreading this conjunction for years, but I'm now seeing some of the positive things about this aspect starting to come to fruition. I love that. There's always ways to contextualize things. And we don't want to spiritually bypass the challenging parts of it. There are some really effed up things that are going on right now. There are people that are in danger. There is overreaches of authoritarian power. All of those things are also giving birth to its opposite, which I think is a really beautiful thing that we can learn through Taoist philosophy. Is at the extremes of things, we see the birth of its opposite. At the extremes of light, we see a seed of darkness. At the extremes of darkness, we see a seed of light. And I think we're seeing the seed of light being born within this extreme period of darkness. Devin says, think of the conjunction like an eclipse. The perfection is way more intense than the approach. Yeah. I believe that when I was learning about traditional astrology and reading Demetra George's really excellent book, Ancient Astrology and Theory and Practice, there was sort of this way of thinking about kalesis, the application within 3 degrees, where you're entering into a room with somebody and they're starting to acknowledge each other when they are within 3 degrees. The conversation happens and the resolution happens when the 2 planets come together perfectly. And then you start to walk away from the situation as they are flowing away from one another. So conversations, interactions, think of these planets as deities that are having conversations about the destiny and the fate of mortals here on this planet. It's not just one word. It's not just like Saturn and Neptune coming together and be like, fuck you, and then walking away. There's a conversation that is happening. There is a lead up. There is negotiation. There is potentially peak moments within that conversation, but it is part of a longer cycle. And I think that when we understand transits through that language, we'll cease to look at one particular event that defines that and start looking at it as a series of events that defines the aspect. Marietta says, this and the stupid Ukraine war has cracked the dome over Chernobyl. Oh man, there's lots of challenging things happening in the world right now, Marietta, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of all of them. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's hard to be able to feel centered enough to deal with all of it. That's something I've been really working on lately, is how do I stay centered while all of these challenges are happening simultaneously? I will offer this. At various points in history, human beings had to deal with crisis. At no point in history did they have to deal with all of the crises all at once, all the time, 24/7, by staring into a black box that we could hold in our hands. And I think that it's really important to realize that, and to realize that part of Saturn and Aries is the binding nature of Saturn, binding us to a fight or flight instinct, binding us to this feeling that every single event requires an equal amount of emotional or an intense energy. And I think that one of the lessons I'm really thinking about and meditating about with Saturn and Aries is that Saturn is a planet that rewards patience, that rewards composure, that rewards delayed gratification over time. And this is not saying that we should ignore challenges. If there is something that resonates with us personally, or that we really feel that we have the skill set to get involved with and to try to make changes around, I think that that is a call to action for you as a personal person. But I think where we can really run into challenges with Saturn and Aries is feeling like we have to do everything about something right now, or we will never get the opportunity again. To me, that is a way to burn out very quickly, to burn through all of the fuel that can keep the flame lit and ignited. So I think that one of the things to think about with Saturn and Aries as well is, how do we sustain our desire for change over time, rather than getting really, really frustrated about one particular thing and then completely burning out. Now, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here, because even though that is true, there are some things that require that burst of yang energy that says, no, I have to make this start now. I can't think about this anymore. I have to get involved in this. I have to take action right now. People around me are in danger. And those are also truths as well. We may have situations in our life, like, for example, we've seen across the United States, the ICE basically coming in and taking our neighbors away and putting our neighbors in danger. And if you're in a situation like that, that might require a burst of yang energy where you respond and protect the people that you care about in your community. There are also ways to do that are peaceful as well. I saw this beautiful video of people singing outside of the Marriott Hotel in Minneapolis, where they were singing basically like, hey, this is, for context, this is a place where ICE was staying in Minneapolis, and they were protesting outside of that hotel. But one thing that I thought was really beautiful is I saw them singing a song of asking for them to join with them, asking for the people inside the hotel to join with the community in being able to put down their weapons, come rejoin the community. You don't have to be like this. You don't have to take these toxic actions. It was a welcoming back into the fold. And I think that this is important to keep in mind as we get into Aries. And I will talk about this specifically when we talk about Aries 1, okay? Because really what Aries 1 oftentimes is going to speak to is a strong desire to say, this is not me, right? I am going to reject something that I am not. So what Aries does is, Aries is the sign of Mars, and Mars is a planet that severs and separates. We have to understand the tools that are given to Saturn as it moves through the house of Aries. If you're unfamiliar with traditional astrology, there is a concept called the guest-host relationship. And in the guest-host relationship, we have one planet providing resources for the visiting planet to their temple, to their domicile, to their home. And in this case, Saturn is now visiting Aries. Now, Aries is hosted by Mars. Mars is the steward of that sign. Mars says, these are all the tools I have to give you to carry out your agenda. Now, that's key. Okay, we're not trying to carry out necessarily, Saturn is not necessarily trying to carry out Mars's agenda. It's trying to carry out its own agenda. Saturn's agenda is, what is it associated with? Endings, beginnings, the way that we organize society, increasing that which is lacking and decreasing that which is excessive. Now, we have to understand the relationship between Mars's agenda and Mars's tools that it's giving to Saturn. What is Mars's agenda? Mars's agenda is to sever and separate so that we can return things back either to the collective, right, or back to the earth. And by the collective, I'm maybe the divine spiritual collective, etc. Think of the transition between Pisces and Aries. Pisces is a dissolving of the barriers and the boundaries that separate us. It is a collective ocean of creation. Mars comes in and says, I'm going to sever the collective. I'm going to sever out an individual soul and give it an individuation of consciousness. I'm going to say this, and what is going to happen within that sign, Mars says, I'm going to reject the parts of the collective that are not me, right? You have to start that to be able to say, who am I? This process in this Decanic narrative says, first I have to start with saying, this is not me. So a lot of what you're seeing right now with Neptune moving into Aries, and you'll see that even stronger when Saturn moves into Aries, is the beginning of change starts by saying, I reject this old organization of society. If we say that Saturn is how we organize our laws, how we organize our agreements, how we organize our responsibilities towards one another, here we have the opportunity to say, I reject this particular organization of society. You're going to see people coming out with a lot of passion around that. And deservedly so. Okay. Austin Cobbett calls this decan the axe, the implement that splits the cell in two, right? The implement that splits us away from a collective. Now, again, I want to also reiterate that people are going to have different ways of viewing the process of rejecting that which is not them. If you are filtering this consciousness through someone who has a fascist mindset, that which is not them are immigrants, people of color, people who are in the LGBTQ plus community. That's their version of that. This is not me, right? If we're maybe, I would say more of the folks here today, that which is not me is the oppressive oligarch, white supremacist, racist class, right? That we're going to strongly reject that and said, this is not me, right? So I think that's really important context in the beginning of this is we have to go through this process. We are bound to go through this process of rejecting that which we are not or that which we don't believe in. I think that this is also dangerous, though, from a lot of different perspectives. It's dangerous for people in vulnerable populations if it's being channeled through a fascist mindset. I think it's also dangerous for those of us who want to create a new society as well, because I think that I have to think about this for a second. I think that it is dangerous for those of us who want to create a new society as well, mostly because of the pushback from people in authority. I think that the fear that people have of Saturn in Aries, of this autocratic kind of authoritarian mindset that a lot of people are talking about with Saturn in Aries, is when power is held accountable by people who want a more fair distribution of it, of resources, of power, of rights, the authoritarian mindset is going to try to clamp down even harder and push back on that. So that also becomes a danger. I would say the other danger that comes through all of this, through all of the consciousnesses that this is filtered through, is the illusion, and this is where we can bring in the Neptune quality here, the illusion that there are two sides of this, the illusion of Democrats and Republicans, the illusion that we are these separate entities, even from the people we hate the most. You know, that's what to me was so beautiful about the Minnesota singing quality, is saying that was the community saying to these people, you're kind of wayward souls, but you're still part of our human race. You're still part of this collective humanity. And if you just see that you are part of that what you do to someone else, you do to yourself, that you don't need to necessarily fear us. You know, you don't need to fear people who are different than you. You are welcome to be a part of this collective working together for communal benefit. That to me is very powerful too. That is turning Saturn on its in Aries on its head and seeing through the illusion that we necessarily are all these separate beings, right? I mean, we are and we aren't. It's a paradox, isn't it? But I think that's another interesting way to look at it. If we look just at the Decanic literature, we have a Mars sign, severing and separating, a Mars face or decan, so very martial decan, okay? Book T and Book of Thoth call it the Lord of Dominion, which is a reference to colonialism, of being able to conquer new territory, to be able to, you see here a figure holding a globe, looking out, seeing which new area he wants to conquer. Now, this is in the language where this was happening in the early 20th century, late 19th century, where this language was very pervasive in the creation of the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. It's still pervasive today. This is really the illusion that we're under. Is sometimes we think that colonialism is like this thing in the past. Like, oh, that happened 100, 200 years ago, but we don't do that anymore. It's been happening. It never stopped happening. like the whole externalization of costs that I've been talking about, where Western countries like America, like strong powers in Europe, etc., externalize those costs. They colonize developing nations. They consume their resources most of the time through force, and then have those countries become indebted to them, and take all of the things that they're creating with their natural gifts and resources in service of debt, in service of the loans that they were given or forced to take to create infrastructure to move their resources from their country to the wealthier nations. Does that make sense? Like, this is so important, that is colonialism, that is colonization. And this is kind of the energy with Aries, and you're seeing something that is kind of coming up with this. Now, we don't have Saturn here quite yet, but we have seen a preview of this with Saturn and Aries in early 2025. And we have seen Neptune moving through this in 2025 and for the last few weeks, where we had the blustering, I don't know, the desire of people in power to expand their empires. We've seen the United States fantasizing about taking over Greenland or Canada or whatever other nation that the oligarch's whim has come up in their mind. So these are fantasies. Do you see what I'm saying? And that fantasy is important to understand. What is the fantasy that they have now? Well, this is how the Decanic language can show us how the illusion may be influencing people in power who may not be aware that they're even being influenced by these planetary energies. I kind of look at astrology in this way. I think that we are susceptible to planetary influence. We are susceptible to the zeitgeist of the time. That is called a Nanke. That is the force that compels us to act through our ignorance. All of these leaders, unless they have astrologers on payroll, they're acting out of their own Ananke, their own ignorance. They're being influenced by these planetary energies just the same way as we are as serfs, right? But it takes on a different form. It takes on a different guise. Now, that type of fate created by Ananke can be shifted through a concept called pronoia. Pronoia is the type of fate we create with foresight. That's why we do astrology. That's why I do this channel. That's why I do it weeks in advance, so that you can prepare yourself for those influences, so that in the moment, you might be able to make a better choice. So I push back on the fact that all of these things necessarily have to be fated from the traditional definition of fate. There are some things that are unchangeable. That type of fate is called hemarmene. That's the type of fate where some of these things are going to happen, but we get to make a choice through pronoia, and that can help us overcome our own Ananke and potentially the Ananke of the people that we have that are our leaders, right? Okay, let's see. We got some nice comments coming in here. What's going on here? Oh, Marietta. Marietta says, good news. I bought myself a new neck pillow to help my neck fracture. I feel better. The Empress stole my first one. I am happy to hear that, Marietta. Maybe this is a good thing for Saturn and Aries coming up, which rules the head and potentially maybe partially the neck. Maybe you've got some new support now. Maybe Saturn's going to give you some new structures to help support your head while you sleep and help recharge. Javier says, it's funny because Saturn is in Pisces, ruled by Mars, I believe, in the third decan of... It's funny because Saturn is in Pisces, ruled by... That statement is a little bit confusing to me, Javier. Can you clarify? Marietta says, Saturn is lawgiver and the inhibitor, the judger of planets, which is why it's connected to the judicial system. Right. In traditional astrology, we thought of Saturn as the very edge of the universe, right? As the edge between time and eternity. So it does represent boundaries, right? It is something that gives us the limitations. Laws give us limitations within our societies. There are limits to what we can do so that we learn how to hopefully treat each other fairly and with respect. Laws help us to understand where we shouldn't go beyond, right? So yes, very, very poignant observations there, friend. Rachel says, I love that example of calling in, literally through song. I don't feel like I have that grace right now, but so important not to see fellow humans as monsters, even when they act like it. 100%, Rachel. And you know what? There's going to be times where we just don't have that grace for people, like you were saying. There are times when we have to feel our anger, when we have to feel and reject that which we disagree with on a fundamental level. But then once we do that, that's when we open up the space to allow people back in. I'm a huge proponent of this because I am somebody who grew up in situations where I did not agree with the authority figures within my life. I grew up with someone who was very much a part of the patriarchy. I grew up with a police officer as a step parent. Okay. And I had to push back on that mindset quite a bit as a young person in an uneven power dynamic. But I also saw behind the veil, I saw the fear. I saw the narratives and the mythology that created that mindset. In my stepdad's case, part of what created some of his belief system was a desire to live up to the sacrifice that his father made in World War II. His father died on the beaches of Normandy when he was a year old. Imagine the weight of that on your shoulders, that you have to believe in the propaganda of the American dream because your father literally died for that dream. Do you see what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that either one of those things are right. I'm not saying the propaganda of the American dream is right. I'm not saying that the use of excessive force as a police officer is right either. I'm saying that when we understand the humanity behind the systemic actions, that helps us to call people in. That helps us to understand how to dismantle it. And partially how you dismantle it is through giving people a new story, giving them a new narrative, through helping people acknowledge that that's what they're doing through pronoia. I tell the story quite a bit on this channel, but there was a time when I was 17, 18 years old. And I remember I was sitting in the garage with my stepdad. And he was spouting off about some conservative talking point that I really did not agree with. And we started talking about his father and like for example, my stepdad, he didn't really care if he lived or died. Like he thought that the only way to live up to the shadow that his father's death cast over him was maybe even potentially to die in the line of duty, right? And he had one point in his life where he stopped a convenience store robbery and basically just went in John Wayne style and probably was very lucky not to die. And we were starting to talk about that. Why do you feel the necessary to do that? Why do you feel like you have to uphold order in this fashion? Maybe it's because you feel like you need to live up to the sacrifice that your father made. And I don't think anyone had ever talked about it like that with him. So there's so many ways to start dismantling the narratives that create the actions. I will reiterate that actions stem from beliefs. Actions can create beliefs, but I do think that it starts with a belief system, even if the belief system is operating beneath the surface. Okay, we all have beliefs that we learned as children. We all have beliefs that we learned from trauma. We all have beliefs that we learned from the good things that happened in our life. And how do we dismantle the traumatic ones, not only for ourselves, but for the people that we're trying to heal so that they don't become toxic monsters in society anymore? It's super important. And that's where grace really comes in. That's where when we get out of the immediate danger and help our neighbors get out of immediate danger, then we have to start dismantling those narratives, or it will happen again and keep happening cyclically again and again and again. This is another thing that I think is super important about Saturn and Aries. You can stop the fire. You could put out the fire right away, you know, but if you don't take care of the arson, the arsonist, right? He's going to keep lighting fires, right? You got to be able to dismantle his desire to start fires. Maybe it's through, you know, taking them out of society, but maybe it's also saying, what psychologically, why do you feel the need to start fires everywhere? Is there something that you're trying to achieve, or is there some narrative that you are mistaken about? How can we bring you back into the fold and rehabilitate your mindset so that you don't have to keep starting fires and putting everyone in danger? It's not to say that everyone is redeemable in that way. I think that there are some people that are so far gone that it's hard. That there will need to be like checks and balances and limits on that. But I'm a firm believer, and I've seen it happen in real time, that when we hold space, even for our enemies, there is it can be healed. I will also say, though, that we need to make sure that we're not letting them hurt more people, right? While we do that. Holding space for your enemy doesn't mean that you condone or let them get away with hurting other people. You can set healthy boundaries. But I'm a firm believer that if you push people further and further into isolation and further into an us versus them mindset, you're radicalizing them even further, and you're not dealing with the core issue that created that type of behavior in the first place. Super important. Rose says, who in Europe? I only know Putin and Russia and China want to expand their empire. I mean, Putin's a big one. I mean, that's, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is the desire to expand into Ukraine, and also China, you know, taking, I believe is the Taiwan kind of situation. I don't know if there's other things going on there. I'm not as good of a world geography historian as I would like to be. But I'm sure that there's other situations like that too. Just remembered again what I wanted to. Okay, send me a message. Julian is here. The world is flat, bro, and the planets are heavenly bodies. I disagree with that, friend, but thanks for being here. I think that the planets are spheres that are circling around our sphere. But you do you, friend. Love paranoia. Rob Bresney. You know, I think Rob Bresney talks about that in his way of looking at astrology. The first place that I heard about this, though, was from actually Robert Hand at the United Astrology Conference in 2018. He did a really wonderful talk about the three types of fate: Ananke, Hemermene, and Paranoia. And then I also heard a really nice lecture from Dorian Greenbaum on similar topics around that. So there are two people that have talked about the different types of fate from the Greek tradition as well. Devin says, co-creation is key. I agree 100%. Devin says, the Bill of Rights was codified in Saturn and Aries, a list of rules that says what the government can't control, right? Say, this is what we are not, right? But here's what I'll say too, Devin. As we move from our understanding of Aries 1 into Aries 2, the first stage of the process is saying, this is what we are not. And to me, maybe this was not necessarily happening in the timeline of Saturn and Aries 1. But if I'm just thinking about it from a larger context, the Declaration of Independence says we are not part of a monarchy anymore, right? We reject the monarchy. We reject the parliamentary system, all of those things. And then what we codify into law is what we do believe. After you reject what you're not, you say, this is who I am, right? So I'd be curious to see what decan of Aries the Bill of Rights was codified in. Was it Aries 1 or was it Aries 2 potentially? Javier says, I was speaking of the potential foreshadowing. Saturn is speaking right now, ending in Pisces, both Mars ruled decans. Saturn in 3 of Pisces and Saturn 1 in Aries. Oh yeah, the back-to-back Mars decans. That's kind of a really unique kind of feature of the Decanic system, as we usually have the decans ruled by planets in descending Chaldean order, but since we have an uneven number of those kind of Chaldean planets, we have this back-to-back Mars energy that's happening. So that's really interesting. As far as I think that the difference between the two is Pisces 3 decan Mars says, what sacrifices are you willing to make for your dream? And then the first decan of Aries says, how do you sever away and take action on those idealized visions that you're having? Javier says also, when will it be squared Uranus and Taurus, Neptune, Saturn, or will it square in Gemini? I'm going to go through a timeline for you, Javier, of the major transits that Saturn's going to be making in 2026, so we'll get there. Let's see. Rob Bresney's wrote a book called Promoya. Okay. We're going to keep going here. Marietta, I don't want to ignore your comments in the chat here, but this sounds like there's a lot of things in that to unpack, and it might take more time than we have here today. So in the interest of staying on task, we're going to keep going, okay? So we've talked about Saturn in its fall, in the house of Mars, in the first decan, okay? And if we move forward and we start looking at things from at the chart, we have a couple pretty important things that are going to be happening. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that Mars is the host of Saturn, right? As it moves through Aries. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you dates for the next year or so where Mars is going to be moving through a different sign. Now that really is important to see what types of fuel, what types of fuel is going to keep the Saturn and Aries fire burning. Now with Mars in Aquarius from February 13th through March 2nd, the fuel that's coming through is able to be received by Saturn. Okay, so it is air fuels fire. It is compatible in its elements. There's a sextile between the two. There is a desire to maybe move from point A to point B. There's a lot of energy towards seeing the bigger picture, the 30,000-foot view, to seeing a humility that comes through that. There's also an interesting mutual reception between those two. Mars is hanging out in Saturn's sign. Saturn is hanging out in Mars's sign. So they are communicating with one another in a way that is potentially mutually beneficial. So being able to see the bigger picture could lead to positive new starts while Mars is in Aquarius through February 13th through March 2nd. Now, the big aspect that's happening during that period of time is going to be the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So we've also kind of looked at this. We've talked to this a little bit today, but February 20th is when they come together perfectly, right? When they perfect. Saturn-Neptune conjunction, themes revolving around concretizing and dissolving. Now, I've done a larger talk on Saturn and Neptune with my friend Melissa LaFara of Energetic Principles. Go check that out. But really, often the themes that we consider with this is beginnings and endings, but things coming into form, but also dissolving out of form. Neptune, I believe, is a solvent. Saturn is something that gets us really hip to the realities of things. It makes things real. So when you have something that's dissolving the old and a planet that wants to make something new and new structures out of it, you simultaneously see the dissolving of old structures and the creation of new ones. A great example of this is the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we had in Capricorn with the fall of the Berlin Wall. We literally had a physical structure, a boundary dissolving, and the creation of a new unified Germany, right? So the destruction of an old way of organizing a society and the birth of something new. So we might be seeing this again with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming up in the end of February. The dissolving of some kind of way of structuring society and the creation of something new. Now, I don't have, specifics about that. You can look around in the news and kind of see some of the things that might be in the process of dissolving and think about what might be new. coming out of that. The real thing that is a little bit frightening with that is that there are some talks about the dissolving of NATO, the dissolving of the United Nations. This is something that could lead to more chaos within the global sphere. But there are other things that might dissolve as well. Maybe it's oppressive systems of government. Maybe it's oppressive economic systems. Maybe it's the type of economics that just takes and takes and takes to the point where we've, within, maybe a few years of inhospitable life on this planet, of not being able to inhabit this planet successfully or sustainably. So it could be the destruction of both of those types of things. It could destroy some things that we like having in our life, and it could destroy some things that need to be destroyed. So I think that this is just change, right? One thing to consider with astrology is it's really just giving us the story of change. Sometimes the good times don't last forever. Sometimes the bad times don't last forever. We're all just in this process of becoming. Okay, let's see. Appreciate you. Hi, Marietta. Yeah, there you go. Devin, Bill of Rights was second decan of Aries. Perfect. And keep that in mind, friends. This is a great call, right? When we have the first decan says, this is what we are not, we are going to reject this. And then we're going to see the establishment of something new when Saturn moves into the second decan of Aries. And I'll talk about that when we get to that point. But yeah, good call. Keep that point in mind when we get there. Devin says, yes, we're witnessing the Uranus return of the UN, right? That one's a little frightening, I will admit, but maybe there's something better that could be birthed within that. I think for the most part, the United Nations is a pretty good thing that is strove for peace on this planet, but maybe there's different ways of organizing it that could be even more effective. We'll see. Okay. When we get into March, all right, so I'm going to keep going forward here. And really those are the kind of the big kind of energies around this. I will say the other thing, while Mars is in Aquarius, that we need to kind of keep in mind is we do have a Mars-Uranus square that is going to perfect on February the 26th or 7th, okay? I think it's important to look at what Mars is doing in aspect to other planets and how it's going to affect Saturn. So this is still Mars in Aquarius, okay? So this is the February 26th, 27th with Mars making the square to Uranus. That could be a really volatile time. Remember what we've talked about over the last couple live streams where we talked about the third decan of Aquarius related to feeling so frustrated that you finally take the leap into the unknown, that you finally untie the knot and go your own way and say, this is done, this isn't working anymore, I need to leave this situation. So this Mars-Uranus square could be this like shocking exits that we might see that may lead to the formation of new ways of organizing both our political and global structures. So keep an eye on that date, the 26th, as a potential point of volatility around that. I will also say that Mars degree is making a pretty exact opposition to Donald Trump's natal Mars at 26 degrees of Leo. So he's definitely going to be a player in that conversation. He's going to be someone who's going to be spotlighted around that period of time. It's also angular for him in the first, 10th and 7th houses are activated on that February 26th and 27th date. Okay, so now let's move to Saturn hosted by Mars in Pisces, okay? So we've got this March 2nd date with Mars moving into Pisces. How is this going to shift? There's energy shifting in a couple ways. First of all, Mars moves out of mutual reception with Saturn. They are no longer exchanging resources from their own temples, right? we are now looking at Mars moving through the house of Jupiter. The other thing that happens when Mars moves into Pisces is it is in a condition called aversion to Saturn at this point. So you could see that Pisces is right next to the house Aries. And those two spots on either side of Aries and either side of the opposition to Aries are called aversion. That means that they are blind spots. The host, Mars, can no longer witness Saturn in its own house anymore. Now, that's a really kind of a fancy way of saying Saturn's staying at Hotel Aries, right? But now Mars doesn't have an open line of communication to tell Saturn where everything is. It isn't able to provide what it needs to do any of the things it wants to do. So this aversion could bring a little bit of confusion because we're kind of like we know we want to sever and separate, but the resources that we need aren't necessarily readily visible or apparent to us. Now, I still believe that when a planet is in aversion, there is still, you still feel it, even if you're not consciously aware of it. I think that this is definitely going to shift how Saturn is guided. It could be more so that instead of looking at things from that 30,000-foot view, instead of like in the third decan of Aquarius, we're feeling the frustration necessary to finally take the leap into the unknown, that we're starting to feel with Mars and Pisces, especially the first decan, confusion. We're starting to feel confused about what comes next, right? When we say, well, this is dissolved. Let's say, for example, the United Nations dissolves in the next few weeks, or NATO or something like that. What comes next? How do we organize what we're going to do to bring people together? How are we going to protect each other? There's probably going to be some moments where we're confused about what the next steps are. The aversion quality, the desire to make a new start, but not being able to see things quite clearly. So this is important to think about, that we're going to be going through different chapters of Saturn and Aries. And I think it's really important to look at where Mars is to understand which chapter we're in. We're going to be in the next couple of weeks, the frustration chapter, where we want justice, we want equality, we have a clear insight as to how to potentially bring that about. But then we're going to enter this chapter of confusion, destabilization. Like, what do we do next? How do we find meaning? Now that we know we've rejected what we don't want, how do we put our energy towards finding the meaning necessary to create the next thing, right? This is what Pisces does. It says, I'm going to reject material security in favor of finding some kind of higher purpose, right? I'm going to go off into my internal narrative so that I can start to release the old story. With Mars moving through Pisces, remember, Mars is severing and separating, okay? Mars is severing mythological narratives in Pisces. It's saying this unifying story no longer works. And when we are being liberated from old mythologies, it takes time to form the new ones. It takes time we feel unmoored. We feel like Odysseus a little bit, right? That movie's coming out, Odysseus. Ulysses, right? If you in a different way. We're trying to find our way home, but we get sidetracked a little bit. So there could be a little bit of indirect motion. We're not going to be moving straight towards our goal when Mars is moving through Pisces. Now, there are some really fascinating things happening when Mars is going through Pisces. The first of all is that Saturn is going under the beams of the sun on the 7th, okay? So this is March 7th. You can see the sun at about 17 degrees of Pisces and Saturn at 2 degrees of Aries. This is a 15-degree arc of separation, and that is a standardization that I've used from Demetra George's way of looking at these things, where the planet becomes invisible. It goes under the beams of the sun. So technically what is happening is when the sun is rising at dawn, oftentimes there will be a period of time where you could literally see the planet, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, etc., in the sky before the daylight hits or before the evening sun sets or when the evening sun sets. When a planet is within the beams of the sun, it's literally so close from our perspective on Earth that we can't see it. There's too much light around it, right? Things become hidden. So Saturn is going under the beams of the sun and things are becoming hidden. Now, one of the things that I will warn all of you about with this is that I have a very, let's see, I have a very poignant memory of the last time Saturn went under the beams where there was a significant event that happened. I'm sure that Saturn's gone under the beams before, since this event, okay? But the January 6th events were when Saturn was going under the sun's beams. The storming of the Capitol in 2021, right? And what we see with Saturn going under the beams is a dissolving of order, a dissolving of an old system, a dissolving of structure, okay? So sometimes that can be a destabilizing event. So I think around this March 7th time period, we might feel like there's chaos, especially with Mars moving through Pisces. Is what we're doing is we're dissolving the old story, we're dissolving the old narratives, but we're unmoored a little bit. When we've dissolved the old, again, Saturn doesn't create new structures overnight. It creates new structures over time, okay? So this is a point where Saturn is becoming an old Saturn. It's taking to its sickbed so that it can become reborn at 4 degrees of Aries on March the 25th. So this is called Saturn Cazimi. So if we move forward to the 25th, you're going to be able to see Saturn conjoining Aries here at 4 degrees, okay, around this period of time, between the 24th and the 25th, okay? And this is the rebirth of the new order, the new organization of society. Because it's in Aries, there's 2 ways that I think we could contextualize this. First of all, we have to look at Saturn first. Saturn is in the 2nd decan of Pisces. This is a decan that's sometimes associated with sorcerer's apprentices. This is interesting. I'm getting some pings on this. People who are not necessarily ready to take power, and are driving the chariots and sometimes driving them into the ground. If I'm making a connection in my head, if we look at the Mars-Uranus squared that's affecting Donald Trump's chart, I think there is not a 0% chance that something happens with him where he's no longer the leader of this country, one way or the other. And if you think about the Saturn Cazimi, you know, that could create some chaos, right? Not to say that it's necessarily good or bad at this point. Like, it could create this whole like destabilization where people are confused about what is going to come next, because, you know, I personally am not supportive of his policies, or I didn't vote for him. I'm not a fan. But for the people that were, their whole reality will be shifting. Their whole like mythology, because this is a person that was exalted in their minds, might be coming crashing down potentially. Now, if you think about Sorcerer's Apprentice energy, if you think about who's next in line, you might have someone who's not quite ready to take on that mantle, but is trying to fly high regardless. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the transition from one source of power to the next. Those are some of the things that the symbolism suggests. Like, what's being fed into that Saturn Cazimi energy is trying to bring into manifestation something from the idealized world, but also overconfidence, okay? The 9 of Cups energy, the overconfidence of trying to be able to, like, I'll show you the card. It's this smug card. it's a very Jupiterian card, but there is some excess of like, you know, if everything's going to be fine. I got this. Like, I don't have to actually pay attention to the details. I've got, it's Falstaff from Shakespeare. By the way, there's a beautiful reel circulating or video from Ian McKellen, Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, where he's being interviewed by Stephen Colbert, and he gets up and he recites Shakespeare from 400 years ago, talking about seeing each other's humanity and rejecting the boorishness of othering immigrants or strangers. It's really powerful. I mean, think about one of the greatest actors of our time. It's just saying such powerful words that are timeless. It's worth your time to check out. So check out the Ian McKellen speech on Colbert from Shakespeare. Let's see. Devin says, we're witnessing the Uranus return of the UN. Mars says, oops, Mars will have contra Antricia sight, not in close degrees, but have found it still makes connection. Okay, good. Marietta says, in Greek mythology, wasn't there someone who took Helios's reins and tried to drive his chariot and got melted? Yes. That is Phaethon. So in the Greek story of Helios and Phaethon, Helios was trying to prove that Phaethon, that he was his son. And Phaethon says, well, dad, in quotation marks, if you really are my dad, you'll grant me this wish that I have. And basically his wish was like, I need to take the car for a spin, like, so he's like, I want to drive the chariot of the sun. Like Helios had a chariot pulled by 4 white horses that carried the sun across the sky. And Phaethon was like, I need to drive, give me the keys. And Helios is like, you don't even have your learner's permit yet, son. Please, anything but that. But he was like, well, I guess I've granted you this wish, and I want to prove that you're my divine progeny. And so he gives him the keys to the chariot, basically. And he isn't ready to drive the ship yet, and he starts to fly too low and burn the earth. He flies too high, and it gets too cold. And eventually Zeus says, you're not ready for this, bud. He sends his lightning bolt and shoots Phaethon out of the sky, and Phaethon drowns in the river, the Eridanus. So it's a warning of overconfidence. And I think that there might be some situation, regardless of whether it's a transition of power from Trump to Vance or something else like that, I do think that there will be a desire to bring about a new structure of society that is based on some kind of overconfidence. And let's say that, for example, the fascists that are running this country right now actually try to institute martial law, because this is part of what a lot of them want. They want to stoke violence. They want to ignite the flames of, the people, so that they can take even more power. That's why I've been encouraging people, like, protest, resist, but please stay as peaceful as you can, because you're really just playing right into an authoritarian's hand by becoming violent, because then that gives them the excuse, not a justified excuse, but an excuse to have tighten their grip even further. So let's say that something like that happens. This probably, because it's a huge overreach, might be some kind of huge overconfidence on their part. It isn't really going to go the way that they hope it's going to go. So I guess keep your eyes peeled for that. Marietta says, not you calling saggies smug. That's my rising. Shots fired. Everybody has positive and negative parts of our personality. Like Sagittarius has some overconfidence sometimes. So does Pisces. Jupiter, right? Jupiter ruled. Cancer, my natal sun can be cloying, like get involved in things that aren't my business. There's all sorts of positives and negatives for every single archetypal thing. Yeah. Rachel says, Gandalf, Ian McKellen, bringing us some extra magic in this hard time. It was so beautiful. Yeah, it was a really beautiful speech. Devin says, why the all caps? I think, Devin, actually, this is kind of we talked about this on a previous broadcast, but this is something that Marietta likes to do. I think it's just part of her her vibe. And I don't think she's actually yelling. I think it's just an intensity that comes through, right? Yeah. It's my safe space, Marietta says. I'll try reining it in if it bothers you, though. Yeah, Devin says it's all good. You be you. That's kind of what I said. It doesn't bother me that much, as long as we know that we're not being shouted at. I think there's so many different ways to communicate, and as long as we have an understanding of each other, it's all good. Reining it better than faith on. There you go. I love it. Okay, so Saturn Cazimi, really pay attention to the events at the end of March, because I think that it's going to give us an idea of what the next cycle is going to bring us as far as how society is going to be organized moving forward. All right, we're into kind of maybe a little bit of a halfway point here. Do me a huge favor, friends. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to take a little stretch break, stretch your legs. We've got a little bit of ways to go. Probably got another hour or so, because we got a lot of ground to cover. And, I'm somebody who tries to be pretty thorough about things as my service to you. So do me a service, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a donation to what I'm doing here today, you can purchase a super chat here live on YouTube, or you can go to buymecoffee.com, or you can support me at the spencermichaud.com by either signing up for a reading or purchasing a webinar at the store. Or you can support my partner, Tanya Andrews, at Third Coast Mojo. We're kind of a team, so supporting her is also supporting me. So I appreciate all of you who have been engaging with that as well. Okay, so let's get back to it. Did y'all get a stretch and a drink? So we have the Saturn Cazimi. Now we have Mars moving into Aries on the 9th of April. So after the Cazimi, really the next kind of phase of this, and I'm not going to go through every single aspect that Saturn makes or is made to Saturn, but I'm going to go through some of the major ones. So here is Mars moving into Aries. April 9th through May 18th. I think this is very significant, because this is where the match gets lit, right? We're thinking about what we believe in. We're planting seeds at the Cazimi while Mars is in Pisces, but not necessarily able to witness. Now we're going to start to see building up a big stellium in Aries, and Mars is going to be back home. Mars was like wandering around like Odysseus, but Mars finally comes back home like Odysseus. And like the story Odysseus, Ulysses, Odysseus is saying, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what are you all are trying to like take my wife? What is this bullshit? And he gets pretty pissed after he's come home and seeing that his land is like in disarray, right? And he's raging out a little bit. Maybe that's Mars coming back to Aries here, where the resources are going to be available for Saturn now to be able to make those new starts, to be able to say, nope, I'm not that. I've got an even more powerful Mars that is going to help us to sever and separate from the past stories, from the past organizations of society. Mars is also going to be conjoining Neptune around this period of time. So we have to be careful that the actions that we take are not based on an illusion, that are not so idealistic that we can't possibly sustain it over time. One of the things that I think is important with Neptune traveling through here is I've been reading Liz Green's Neptune book in various sections over the past few months. And one of the things that really is apparent to me reading that is a lot of the times where Neptune is traveling through, there is an enormous amount of idealism towards the energy of that sign in the very beginning. And there is this striving towards finding salvation through the elements of that sign. What happens towards the end of this Neptune transit through a sign is a lot of the energy for that method of salvation starts to wane, and it's shown to be illusionary. It's shown to be maybe not the whole story. one of the challenges with Neptune traveling with Saturn and Mars, etc. here, and the sun, obviously, in this period of time, is that we could get so idealistic about making a new start. We could get so idealistic about rejecting that which is not us, that we kind of miss the point that we're all one at some point. And by the end of it, we realize that radical independence maybe isn't all it's cracked up to be. I think that the other danger with this too is, as we're rejecting the systems that don't no longer serve us, we may feel like we have to go our own way. Like I've been, I would say, a victim of this influence in various times in my life, where I have said, I don't believe in the system. I don't believe in capitalism or late stage capitalism. I don't believe in exploiting other people through competition and exploiting the earth through the monetization of the commons. I don't want to participate in that. I want to go off on my own. And an example of this was my attempt to live off the grid in mid 2010s. We even put a offer in on a farm that was accepted. It was like 5-acre little farm with a really dilapidated house on the property. And 2 weeks away from closing, we actually got the keys in advance, and we're going through and cleaning out all the garbage that was left in the house because it was in really bad shape. And we found a document that was a water test, a failed water test. And the previous owners had had a water test because they had both gotten sick with cancer. And the water table was severely, severely polluted from 2,500 like 55-gallon barrels were like deposited in various properties in the water table in that area. And they discovered it. It was a Superfund site. They discovered it because AT&T went in and was digging out new telephone cables, fiber optic cable things, and their workers were fainting. So it was never cleaned up. We did all the research. We went to the county and got all the documents and saw the pictures of this toxic waste that had been in the area. And it was a huge wake-up call to me that there is no real, true escape from these systems. We are interconnected with one another. As much as we might want to run away from the challenges that we see, like saying, we don't want to participate in this system. We're just, by virtue of being on the same planet together, by virtue of being part of, I think, a collective, there is a little bit of a hive mind to the human species. I think being part of that, there's nowhere to run away to. And I think that this is the illusion that Neptune is eventually going to reveal, is that this radical independence, this going off on your own and rejecting the old system while the old system is still going, doesn't really work. We have to be able to rely on one another and figure out ways to cooperate with one another. We have to find ways to dismantle the most toxic of the systematic things and create a new way of relating and finding relationships with one another that's functional, that is serving the community rather than at odds with one another. It was a really huge lesson for me because there was a part of me that was like, nope, I'm going to go do that American thing of like, go be a pioneer out in the wilderness and just live in the woods, and I'll be fine if I don't have to, I'll be able to grow my own food and do all this stuff. And some of that is true. Some of that, you don't have to participate in some of the toxic systems, but at the end of the day, you're part of a human species and you can't escape the worst of this. You can't just escape into the wilderness. And I think that this is something that's really important with the Neptune part of this. Rachel says big Odysseus energy, right? Totally. Marietta says, I need to get you to do a reading on Empress. She's so dramatic, but I think all black cats are. If you know your pet's birthday and birth time, I'd be happy to do that. I love doing, I love interacting with our feline friends, and our animal companions have charts. They may be, their motivations may be a little bit different, but I'd be happy to help you if you have that information. Devin says the illusion of individualism needs to be dissolved. Yeah, and I think it will be. I think that is why the Neptune cycle is a process. There's a beginning, a middle, and an ending to that story. We're going to fall into a collective delusion of radical individualism. But then that's going to be shown to be false. And if we know that going into it, we're less susceptible to the gaslighting of Neptune. I think Neptune's the ultimate gaslighter planet, right? And if we know that going in, we can really be on our guard against the illusion of radical individualism and build relationships with one another. That's the way to deal with that, is to not feel like we have to take on the burden of everything as individuals, that we need to formulate positive relationships with one another. Marietta says, if you knew how many times the corporatocracy has just casually poisoned people by poisoning the environment, Hanford and Westlake, Missouri are just two such instances. I mean, it's the tale as old as time, right? Tale as old as time, friend. Happening all sorts of places, but we can help heal that. Javier says, like Into the Wild. Yep, exactly. Okay, so Mars in Aries, April 9th through the 18th of May. Couple important things going on while Mars is in Aries. Saturn is going to emerge as the morning star at about 6 degrees of Aries. So here you can see here around March, April 11th or so, March, I don't know why I keep saying March, April 11th and 12th, Saturn will be emerging from the beams. So that arc of separation, and it's emerging as the morning star, right? It is, if we go over, here's a little technique for those of you who are curious about this. If you put Saturn on the ascendant, okay, Saturn will rise in the east. The ascendant is always kind of in the northern hemisphere, the eastern horizon, where planets rise over this east, culminate here at noon, in the highest in the sky, set in the west, and then they're underneath our visible plane in the nadir here at the lower midheaven. But you could see that Saturn is starting to rise before the sun. It becomes the morning star. That was said to be a more comfortable place for Saturn, I believe, because it is in the heat of the day, and it kind of heats up some of the coldness of Saturn. There was an elemental quality to Saturn that was either cold and dry, or even some older texts describe it as cold and damp. So it's going to dry out some of that. Now, this is kind of interesting because Aries is also pretty hot and dry. So if we've got an even hotter Saturn, maybe there's some heat coming around with that. But I think that the way to look at the Saturn synodic cycle is under the beams of the sun, the old Saturn cycle is dying. Order is kind of dissolving, and it's a little bit chaotic. When it is conjoining the sun, it's infused with a new sense of purpose. It's the beginning of the next Saturn cycle. And then when it emerges from the beams, some of those changes that may have been happening behind the scenes start to become visible. Okay, so keep those dates in mind, right? The 7th of March for Under the Beams, the Cazimi on March 25th, and then Saturn emerging on April the 11th. That's also setting up this huge Aries stellium, okay, from the 15th to the 20th. So check this out. I mean, when the moon and Mercury enter Aries around the 15th, you've got Mercury, Neptune, Mars, Saturn, the moon, and the sun all hanging out in Aries, and Chiron. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets, not traditional planets, but 6 planets, and then an outer planet and an asteroid, all hanging out there in Aries. Big, big, big Aries energy. And this is really setting up this Mars-Saturn conjunction along with Mercury on the 19th at 7 degrees of Aries. I want you to keep that degree in mind, 7 degrees Aries. That's important because later on in the year, Saturn is going to station direct on this exact degree where Mars and Saturn are coming together. Now, Mars and Saturn coming together, I mean, this is just kind of the rubber meeting the road, right? This is the taking action on the concretization of these forms. Some people describe it as a 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brakes when Mars and Saturn are either, conjoining or squaring off or opposing. I think in Aries 1, though, I think it's, all systems go. I think it's a rash moving forward type energy. But potentially a new start, right? The resources necessary to make a new start, to concretize that which has been put into the collective. Oh. Marietta says, I hate rugged individualism lie. None of them came from the woods, killing bucks with their bare hands and splitting wood with their fingertips. Everybody needs each other. Yep, I agree. Sorry for the intensity, she says in lower caps. It's okay to be intense. One thing I will say, Marietta, is when I'm using caps or when I'm using tone, one thing I will say is if you use all caps all the time, or if you yell all the time, sometimes it makes the message a little bit diluted when you actually need to emphasize something. So I'm not telling you that you need to not be you, but I will say that the contrast can be much more powerful. You won't see me getting like super worked up at every single thing on this channel, but when something's super important, I will get worked up, and I hope it'll have more impact because that hasn't been my just operating speed the entire time. So I do think contrast can actually get your point across even better. But again, you do you, friend. The Ides of March, Spencer. Yeah, this could be some challenging stuff in March. Also, I know there's an April eclipse. Is there one also this month in February? There is an eclipse. We have an eclipse coming on February the 17th that is hosted by Saturn. Probably should have been included in here, but since it wasn't a specific aspect that Saturn was making, I didn't. But it is the first eclipse that we're seeing that is going to be hosted by Saturn in Aries that we've had for quite some time. Eclipse on the 16th and 17th. Yeah. And that one's a big one for moving away from what we don't want anymore. The frustration of beginning a cycle of dismantling the old karmic knot, like Austin says, in regards to Aquarius 3. Rose says, all that on my North Node. Will I see the light then? I don't know if you'll see the light, but you'll definitely probably have an increase in your desire to individuate and your desire to make a new start, potentially, with it on the North Node. Devin says, I think with Aries 1, we get the runaway boulder downhill. Yeah, I think that's an apt metaphor for sure. Rose says, caps don't bother me. Everybody's using caps now. Trauma Raised Me says, my moon is in Cancer. It's hard for me. No, it's all good. But see, now that was in lower caps. And then Marietta says, my moon, the energy is so intense right now in all caps, which is an appropriate use of caps, I would say. You know what, though? It wouldn't be an Aries broadcast if we didn't have some statements in all caps. I think that the Aries is like the sign of all caps, of saying everything is of equal importance intensely. I don't necessarily think that's true, but I think that it can feel that way sometimes. But I would suggest pacing ourselves, whether it's in the chat or in life. I think that this is a good way to go about the world. Okay, so that Mars-Saturn conjunction, very powerful on the 19th of April, a potential turning point, but a degree that Saturn is going to retrograde back to. So whatever is put into place around this time with Mercury, Mars, Saturn, all coming together at this degree, it's going to be revisited, right? There's going to be some revisiting of this. So don't take everything at face value. Don't think that the final story has been told when the events of this unfold. There's going to be some backtracking that comes. Now, here we have Saturn moving into the second decan of Aries on May the 8th. And it's going to be in the second decan of Aries all the way until the 21st of October, okay, when it retrogrades back into the first decan. So here is May 8th or so, right, where it's moving into the second decan. So let's talk about that. Let's see. Excuse me. I'm going to bring back our Decan flashcards. And let's look at Aries 2, the second decan of Aries. Now you see the Three of Wands as our syncretized Rider-Waite Tarot card. This is called the Lord of Established Strength. The Book of Thoth calls it the Lord of Virtue. Austin Coppock calls it the Crown. Now this is interesting because we have a solar decan. In a lot of traditional texts, the sun is associated with royalty, with kingship. I've been trying to campaign for a different view of the sun based on generosity, based on unlimited ability to create vitality through giving, which is something that I've learned from the book Sacred Economics that talked about sun worship in indigenous cultures as supporting it as the source of all life, as a light that would give and give and give and give without any expectation of return, right? So I think that this is another way we could recontextualize Aries too, also, since it's a solar decan. But the crown associated with royalty, we have a decan here that follows rejecting what we are not. And we have a decan that says, well, now here is who I am. And I'm going to shine this light out. I'm going to make a royal decree. I've said, nope, I'm not that. What do we want? Now, I want you to remember what Devin said, Selene's Gateway, about the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But it was one of the founding documents of the United States that says, this is what we believe. Here is what we are. We rejected the English way of doing things. We rejected the king. We rejected we rejected the monarchy. Now here's the new form of government that we are trying to sustain and move forward. We might have more of these things coming up. We might have new declarations. We might have new laws of saying, well, we know we're not this. Now who are we? Okay, who do we want to be? Personally, you could be saying these things too. During Saturn in Aries 1, you could be rejecting things that you're not. You could be taking a stance morally, politically, etc., about rejecting the systems that you do not agree with. Here, this energy could help you support creating the interconnections, the relationships that will be more just moving forward, potentially, that say, this is what I do believe in. And you may have to really be committed to those values. This is Saturn saying, well, you've been talking the talk. Are you ready to walk the walk? Right? It says, are you ready to be bound to that set of values that you've been kicking around? An interesting time, right? Now, another part of this that could be volatile, I guess. Let's see. Okay. Devin says the Declaration of Independence was Saturn in Libra. The Bill of Rights was Saturn in Aries. Perfect. I love it. Okay. So we have the Bill of Rights. That is, it says, here's what we believe. And so we have the rejection part in Saturn in Libra, which is interesting, right? And I wonder too, was it Saturn retrograde? Because we'll talk about this as we go further along, Devin, but there is a period of time in 2026 where when Saturn retrogrades, and we're getting to that shortly, where there is literature in Vedic astrology or Jyotisha that talks about an exalted or fallen planet acting as its opposite when it is retrograde. So I could almost see a Declaration of Independence being during Saturn retrograde in Libra, which would be acting as like this is what we're not. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It'd be really fascinating if it did. But the Bill of Rights potentially saying, okay, here's who we are, right? This was a Saturn in Aries 2. These are our royal decrees. This is what we're going to do now after we've gotten rid of everything else that we are not. Marietta says, yes, Spencer, everything is intensely of equal importance to me all the time. I don't know where Aries is in my chart, but he's definitely got to be somewhere highly influential on me. Well, there you go. That's cool. It's all good. It's not how I communicate, but I'm not you, so that's okay. You can be however you want, Fred. All right. Let's see. Some of the interesting parts about Saturn and Aries too is, let's see here. I'm going to take this down. I'm going to put the chart back up. Is we're going to have Mars in Aries for the first, I don't know, week or so, but then Mars moves into Taurus. So after Mars moves out of Aries, okay, it's going to be moving into its exile in Taurus, a challenging place for Mars, a weakened place for Mars. It's also moving into its aversion to Saturn, to its own home domicile, okay? So you remember how we had that confusion when Mars was moving through Pisces because Mars was not able to witness from a clear traditional aspect. Now we have a similar issue with Mars on the other side of Aries. One thing that I think maybe even Devin pointed out to me at one point is when we were experiencing the January 6th events with Saturn under the beams in 2021, Mars was in Aries. And as soon as Mars moved into Taurus, things started to settle down, to calm down, right? All the energy went out of the sails of that event. We probably potentially could see something similar here. The wind going out of the sails of some kind of blustery type of event moving forward. So I would also say too that in traditional astrology, a malefic planet can be a little bit unstable when it's in its exile or in its fall. It doesn't act the same way that it would as it would in its like domicile as consistent energy. The way that Mars is inconsistent is in Taurus is it says sometimes we can't stop when we want to. Sometimes we can't get moving when we need to get moving. It's the challenge of inertia, right? It's the challenge of establishing a routine, right? So when we make this new royal decree, when we start to try to establish our new patterns, and we have a lot of enthusiasm for it, we have all caps all the time with Mars and Aries conjoining Saturn, and then Mars moves into Taurus and we're like, I'm pretty burnt out. I've said so many things in all caps that it just doesn't have the same meaning anymore. Like, I can't sustain this level of enthusiasm. Maybe I need to do some lower caps things for a little while. It can feel a little bit unsettling because we expected to be able to sustain that passion. And now it feels like we're tired, exhausted, etc. So be careful of that moving forward. Devin says the Declaration of Independence. Okay, he says Saturn is direct in both charts and is also, it was in Libra 2, 14 degrees, and then Aries 2, 12 degrees. Interesting. That decan of Libra is Saturn ruled and talks about oaths and agreements. So pretty important oaths and agreements with the Declaration of Independence. Devin also says J6 was wild to watch that in real time. It seriously just fizzled out. Yeah, absolutely. It was astrology just playing out on a national and global scale right before our eyes. Rachel says, you've just articulated my life as a Mars and Taurus. Yeah, and I've witnessed this with my own father too, Rachel. My dad has Mars and Taurus, and I remember as a little kid, like, he went through periods of great lethargy, and then just times where, like, if he liked to clean the house. If he got on the, a Mars kind of jag going cleaning, you just didn't want to get in his way. If you got in his way, he'd just run you over. Like, I remember just kind of almost getting run over by a vacuum cleaner as a child because he's like, I'm cleaning, get out of my way. Like, it's just, it's a problem. Like, being able to know when to stop too. What Taurus, I think, is most known for me as a Taurus moon, is healthy routines, being able to do enough work and then to be able to rest and then to do it consistency. And with Mars and Taurus, the consistency just isn't there. So I think this period of time with Saturn and Aries too is just an inconsistent energy level to sustain the enthusiasm of the declarative statements that we've been making with Saturn in Aries too. Now, there's some other things that are a little sticky that we should be aware of too. Mars squares Pluto on the 25th. So here is Mars at about 4 or 5 degrees of Taurus, 5 degrees of Taurus, squaring Pluto at 5 degrees of Aquarius. Mars-Pluto squares are pretty difficult when it comes to violence erupting around things. Now, Mars moving through the first decan of Taurus, I have a feeling that this could be a financial problem, some kind of financial issue being exposed where people are worried about scarcity around this period of time. The first decan of Taurus is the 5 of Pentacles in the tarot, if you're familiar with that. And it shows people that are falling on hard times, right? The wisdom that comes through that decan, a Mercury ruled decan, is not necessarily that you're going to be poor or destitute. It's the fear of being poor or destitute or of lack and scarcity that causes you to plan for your future, to be able to plant seeds, to be able to clear the field of rocks, to plow the field so that you can plant new seeds. So I think one of the things to think about when we're looking at this chart is we are probably going to be feeling a pinch of some sort, or there's going to be events happening that expose something corrupt, the contact with Mars and Pluto, okay, that has been pushed underneath the ground and that causes us to feel nervous or scared about our resources moving forward. I have a feel, I mean, here's the thing. You can prepare for these things. And I don't mean just like by getting a bunker out in Montana and hoarding. That's not what I mean. You can prepare for this type of thing by understanding that we are in a cycle of economics that cannot be sustained moving forward. We are in a cycle of late stage capitalism that inevitably will collapse. And if you live your life with that realization, there are decisions that you make where you're not living in some bubble of illusion that it's just number go up forever and that you can just buy whatever you want into infinity and that it will always just be, the shelves will always be restocked, because this is the grand illusion, is you buy food at the store one week and the next week it's just automatically appears. It's just, it's so crazy how this how sheltered we've been as far as how all of this works. So if you start dismantling your attachment to I don't know, the illusion of security through a corrupt system, you will be able to navigate a Mars-Pluto square from Taurus to Aquarius much easier, because you won't be under the illusion that you just are able to like have financial prosperity based on the hidden externalization of costs over time. So what I would suggest between now and then, start dismantling yourself from exploitative capitalism. Start canceling your Amazon subscriptions. Don't buy things from large corporate places. Start learning how to grow some of your own food. That is, I think that's a good way of utilizing the initiative of wanting to be a little bit more self-sufficient. I know in our household, we have plans this year to plant more gardens. Last year, we tried to heal our land, I don't know, that we're stewards of, by removing a bunch of concrete that was buried in the backyard and planting food forest trees. We planted June berries, service berries. We've planted blueberry bushes and pawpaw trees and more native pollinator habitat. All of those things are helping to heal the land and make it more, I don't know, functional moving forward. We also are kind of clearing out space to grow more of our own food so that when the inevitable collapse of the system that is being propped up by the exploitation of developing countries and of poor and working class people inevitably collapses, then maybe the transition won't be as painful. The other thing I would suggest beyond just like, oh, well, turn every inch of your backyard into a garden, just start to get to know your neighbors. You know, this is how you prepare for a Mars-Pluto square where you're afraid of scarcity. I keep talking about one neighbor that I keep getting to know, but we've really established a family-like relationship over the past year or so. And he's kind of like an uncle to me now, right? And we help each other. And I was talking about what he was offering to do these things to help us with our garden over here. And I've been helping him apply for different social services because he's in his 70s and he's struggling with some food insecurity. But he has a big garden space in his backyard and he can't really work all of it, and it has great light. And he's like, you know, if you want to come plant some stuff in my backyard this year, you're welcome to do so. And I'll be like, yeah, I would love to do that. And I will help you to take care of the stuff that you're growing. And these are the types of relationships that we form that can help us to weather these types of potential insecurities, whether it comes through resources or whatnot. Getting to know your neighbors. If you can't go out and do all the physical labor necessary to grow every inch of food, get to know your neighbor that is growing something. Figure out what you can grow and then learn how to exchange it with someone else that can grow something else. Or maybe you have a different skill set and you make the relationship where someone else is growing food and you're exchanging some of your skills and your gifts with them so that you can have this web of reciprocity. That to me is the way to prepare for Mars square Pluto. It's not to be afraid. It's not to hoard. It's to start building relationships so that when the inevitable collapse of these things happens, we're not just like left out to dry. We've already started establishing the mycelial networks between each other that are going to help create a system that is so much more stable than one that is being propped up by illusions and lies and exploitation. I mean, it's an opportunity, in my opinion. Devin says, the image I just got was of those runaway truck ramps. Like Mars and Aries can be a runaway truck, and then it hits Taurus, in which is the sandy hill that helps safely stop the truck. There you go. It slows everything down a little bit, right? Yeah, absolutely. Marietta says, what do you think of the bullion market crash from about a week ago? I don't have a ton of thoughts about it. I don't really have a lot of investments. So it's not something that I'm not really watching those markets that closely because I don't really have a lot invested in it. My security is not based on the stock market, and that's intentional. I know that there are fallout from that I will have to be aware of. But again, I think that one of the ways to be, I don't know if sheltered is the right word, but to be more resilient when those things happen is exactly what I just talked about, is building relationships with your local community. Like Marietta, I believe for you, there's an old lady that wants to connect with you. And we've heard this story time and time again, and maybe it's time to make friends with her. Right? You know, maybe she's a pain in the butt now, but maybe there's things that you can be in solidarity with each other, right? Marietta says, and those of us doomers know the supermarket has only 3 days worth of food, right? Look into copper coils for your soil, plant blood meal. They will work wonders for your garden. I have heirloom seeds to barter. Nice, I love that. Yeah, bartering. This is the kind of the concept I think that can really help, right? Rachel says, I love that. Community gardening is so essential. Yeah, it's those are the types of ways that we create resiliency during these times. And it's not through putting more Saturnian weight on us as individuals. It may feel like we have to do so because we've been so trained in a different narrative. But this is the opportunity to write a new narrative that is based on a gift society, that's based on helping each other and the truth of us being in relationship with one another. That is not an illusion. We are in relationship with one another. The lie is that we're separate. The lie is that we can just do everything on our own and then not work with anyone else. That's it's not sustainable. That has brought us to where we've been as a globe at this point. Maria says gold and silver runs the market. I think they crashed it to slow down the crash of paper money. Could be. I guess I'm doing my research on economics right now, Marietta. I've been reading Sacred Economics and the history of usury and debt. I have another book coming from the library called Economics with an X on the end, and it's a graphic novel that shows you the history of our economic system. And I think if I combine those two and a couple other books, I'll start to be able to wrap my head around these things better. But I'm still in process with it. And what I do know is that a lot of times when the markets become unstable, people put their money into physical goods rather than speculative goods like gold and silver, the physical means of representing value, rather than like, I don't know, like pork bellies or something like that, which is speculative. So it can show you that investors are nervous about things when the commodities market like that starts to change. But I also don't completely know what I'm talking about with all of that either. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, and let me finish some of that research, and we can have a much more informed conversation about it, I think, within the coming weeks. I think it is an important conversation because the story and the narrative of money, I think, drives a lot of the actions that we're seeing in our collective right now. It's driving the violence. It's driving the oppression. It's driving the fear. It's driving the scapegoating. So understanding how our economic system can work and can work in a better way is I think the core fundamental issue that we're facing as a species right now, because the destruction of the planet has come for economic reasons. It's come because we are turning the commons into something that is monetized. We're taking something that has intrinsic value, nature, that is priceless, and quantifying it and putting a value on it and turning it into something homogenized, which is money. That's destructive. And that is the thing that needs to shift. Marietta says, I'm working on my anti-socialism and everybody is out to get me, schizoid brain. One day at a time. One day at a time. We're not out to get you. We're your friends. Javier says, you're reminding me of the hospital, and to heal me, they used kindness, compassion, and unity to uplift the patients instead of casting us away like garbage. Perfect. That's the way we heal these things. And that's the way we heal, I think, our community members that have fallen into illusion, that have fallen into isolation, that have fallen into a trap of the story of separation, right? And we heal that by bringing them back in. We heal that by showing them love, not by driving them further away. Like you with your mental health story, with the mental health challenge that you were going through, you healed through being brought back in to love instead of being pushed further away to the fringe. It's amazing how that happens. It's a really important message for this transit in particular, I think. Mary says, you'll get it soon, Spencer. You've got a good handle on the socioeconomic environment. I'm trying. I will say it was a topic that wasn't super, that I rejected for a long time. My mindset was, money is evil. I don't want to know anything about it. I want to know about things that have real meaning, like the real meaning stuff, the intangible things. But I'm realizing that they're not separate. Intangible, tangible, it's all part of the same story. It's all part of the same journey. It's okay to learn about how things are exchanged from one place to another. And I think it's really important to learn how our economy works, because it's so confusing. And I think it's confusing on purpose. I think that there's so many different levels to it that we're told that you need a PhD in economics to understand it. And that's because they don't want us to understand it. They want to be in control of it, the powers that be. But when we start understanding how it works, we can start actually creating our own systems that are more in alignment with actual intrinsic value. But you have to understand what you're trying to dismantle first. If you don't understand it, you're going to be doomed to just get lost within it again. So again, this is part of my personal project lately, is how do I increase my economic literacy so that I can help to create a system and be a part of a system that is more based on, I think, like things like indigenous wisdom, gift economy, an economic system that takes into account the internalization of costs rather than the externalization. This is how we dismantle the patriarchy. This is how we dismantle white supremacy. This is how we dismantle fascism and corporatism and kleptocracies. We have to learn about how we got to this point first, and then we have to envision something different. Okay, we can complain about it all we want, but for me, you have to understand. It's like taking something apart. If something's broken, like think of you've got a watch or something, and it's not spinning anymore. Okay, it's like a good metaphor for our economic system. The hands are stuck. We got to take it apart and see how it works, so that we can reassemble it, maybe and take out the part that is blocking the hands from moving, so that we can get things flowing again. All that money is what it should be is a means for exchange. It is a symbol that helps us to exchange the gifts that we have, whether they are tangible gifts or intangible gifts. And what we've had is a breakdown in the ability for us to exchange things fairly. We have people that are just kind of blocking and hoarding the flow of exchange. They're damming up the rivers so that they have a whole like lake of resources behind them. And we need to get the flow going again. But that water is stagnant, and it's creating death rather than the life that like a beaver would make by making a dam, right? It's not the same. It's different. It's the kind of thing where when we make man-made dams that destroy the environment and where the water becomes stagnant, we got to take down those dams. We got to dismantle those things, but we have to understand how they work first. Marietta says, the end is celestial socioeconomic destruction, comes in cycles, and so does resurrections. I know you guys aren't out to get me. I love you all. Oh, we will love you too, Marietta. We're not out to get you. We're just having a conversation. Yep, hearts to you. There's no such thing as ancestral money that people burn and use in magic. Just saying. Yeah. E.G. Vautrier is here. What's up? Says, my first time watching. I follow your daughter on TikTok. You are so cool. Thank you for your commentary and insight into these transits. Oh, thank you, friend. And thank you for coming over here from Sag Moon Magic on TikTok. Appreciate you. My beautiful partner, Tanya from Third Coast Mojo, just did an interview with Sophie on Sag Moon Magic yesterday. And it's a really nice community over there. A really nice group of people that were helping to just ask a lot of questions about magic and astrology and about how things are going in the world. And just appreciate you being here. Thank you. I hope you keep coming back. This is a really nice community here. Really intelligent people that have a lot of interesting things to offer. And we're just exchanging ideas and kind of trying to put our heads together to figure out how to create a better world, a more just, equitable world to live in with each other. So thank you, friend. Yeah, Marietta says the tech oligarchy, yuckity. Yeah, that's another thing we're gonna have to get past, is the surveillance state. Like the data centers, the rise of AI. We'll have to figure that out. It's already here, but we'll have to navigate that too. Javier says, I'm not with my daughter at the moment and just lost a very close loved one on Tuesday. This eclipse cycle is truly showing me my values. Aquarius, North Node in the second house. Yeah, we have to figure out what we value. A lot of times the things that we value aren't tangible. They're the love and the relationships that we have with one another. And I valued those things sometimes to the my own detriment with the physical parts of things. I've kind of taken on a little bit of martyrdom when it comes to my physical reality, but I've also sometimes I've externalized costs to other people in my life, and that's something I'm trying to really work through right now, is realizing that that's my own form of colonialism, is externalizing a cost to someone else, to be taken care of. And it's tough. It's a tough reality check to come into alignment with. But I think being able to believe in ourselves, to have confidence in our ability to understand how we can utilize the means of exchange in a positive way rather than just rejecting it wholeheartedly. That's how I'm trying to heal my own story and narrative. That's how I'm trying to make a change for once in my life. I'm looking at the man in the mirror, gonna make a change. Right? We all have these things that are stories that we accepted about how things were. In my story, I rejected money altogether because I witnessed the abuses that it had on my family in particular, how it created separation in my family, greed in my family, just a lot of that. I'm trying to heal that trauma. One day at a time, though, friends. This is why we educate ourselves. Lots of karmic lessons, yep. Okay, so that's our Mars-Pluto score. I thought that was a big one to take into account because we've seen a lot of Mars-Pluto action in Minnesota in particular. So here's something I will say. This event will probably be connected to that one because we had Mars-Pluto coming together when we had the events happen in Minneapolis around Pretty and Good, right? The murders of those two individuals. And this is a continuation of that Mars-Pluto cycle. But again, I think it's more related to an economic issue because of Mars's placement in the first decan of Taurus. Okay, so now we move forward to Mars in Gemini hosting Saturn. So let's move forward. This is going to be from the 28th of June, okay, to August 11th. So we're going all the way forward to the 28th of June. Now, I did skip over, can't do every single aspect, but there will be a Mercury-Saturn square that's happening in the beginning of June. You know, sometimes that's where we have heavy thoughts on things. None of those planets are in Mercury isn't in a super detriment or exaltation or anything like that. So we can kind of move a little bit off that. It will have an impact, but I'll talk about that one in June. But we go forward with Mars in Gemini, and things get interesting around this period of time. And very, very interesting. Now we have Mars in Gemini traveling with Uranus. And we have a couple pretty big aspects coming during the Mars and Gemini point in time. First of all, Mars is out of aversion with Saturn and now has a direct line of sight to Saturn via sextile in Gemini. Okay, so here you can see Mars can now witness this planet. It is also making an application to Uranus, and it is going to perfect exactly on July 4th. Does that date sound familiar to anybody out there? That is the 250th birthday of the United States. A Mars-Uranus conjunction on the United States 250th birthday. That's pretty intense. We have a Mercury retrograde cycle that's happening there. Jupiter will have just moved into Leo. So now we have Jupiter applying to an opposition with Pluto. Potential for volatility around this period of time. Gemini, Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini 1. I mean, this is also in the United States 7th house. When we have Uranus Gemini returns, because Uranus is in the United States, 7th house in Gemini. Oftentimes that's been associated with conflict, with international conflicts, with other types of conflicts. This could be spicy. This could be a spicy one. This is a very visible time for the United States. This is a time where if, I don't know, if someone were to be kind of sending a symbolic message to this country, that the possibility for violence could erupt, I would say. I would say also, though, that the energy of Gemini 1 is one where we feel like there's so many options that we feel paralyzed. So I do think that whatever is happening around this period of time, we may feel like there's just so much chaos going on that we don't even know what to do about it, right? That we don't even know which way to turn. You could see that in the Eight of Swords card, where someone is bound and blindfolded. I think this is also could be, if we're thinking about what tools Mars would use to create havoc in Gemini, it's communication. It's things like the internet, things like artificial intelligence. It's things like our communication systems, the media, etc. So we could have some shocking revelations and communications. In one extreme, this could be like a cyber attack or something like that, right? Or maybe the internet is shut down for a period of time. That's something that I think has been a weapon of war in a lot of different situations, where you saw this recently in Iran, where the internet got shut down completely because of the protesting that was going on there. I think that's something that has the potential, unfortunately. But yes, a potentially volatile time around the 4th of July, 3 degrees of Gemini. Rachel says, well, at least they're not conjunct Algol this time. Yeah, wasn't that the last Mars-Uranus conjunction we had was on Algol? Yeah, that was kind of rough. I will say this, friends. I don't like to necessarily be an alarmist or anything like that. Mars does conjoin Uranus every couple years. I don't know if it does it every single year. I think that Mars's cycle is like a 1.5-year cycle, depending on the retrograde. But it's not like so uncommon that we're like, oh shit, like this is some huge thing guaranteed. But it is something to keep an eye out for. Whenever Mars is making contact with those outer planets, they do tend to be more collective events. You know, when Mars is making contact with Pluto, there's things that are exposed that have been hidden, whether it's violence or corruption. When Mars conjoins with Uranus or squares Uranus or contacts Uranus, there are these like flashes of awareness, this like unexpected events that happen. And how do we prepare for Uranus events? I think just through maintaining our nervous system, through knowing that it's a time where we need to create extra space in our lives for being able to respond to actions that we didn't necessarily have on our bingo card, right? And being able to practice their self-care to the point where we're not going to get completely burnt out by the rapid, unexpected news or events that are happening. Marietta says, I know you don't like talking about him, but Trump's birthday is 6/14. He's a Gemini. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what's going on his birthday, but I don't know if it's anything special. His solar return has Mars in Taurus, I guess, and Saturn in Aries. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is the reason why I'm not super like, I have to talk about this individual all the time. He is a symbol of something bigger, you know? He is a figurehead and a projection of a system that's been in place for hundreds and hundreds of years. So while, yes, he is somebody that people like to break down and analyze and talk about, I'm more interested in seeing instead of just like, how do we win against DJT or whatever? It's like, no, how do we change the system that created Donald Trump? How do we change the beliefs and the myths and the stories that allowed a person like that to come to power, maintain power, and continue to hurt people? Because if we don't, there's just going to be another Donald Trump. It's just going to be another person in a longer cycle. That's why, like, I don't spend my time focused on him as an individual. It's so much bigger than him. He's an important figurehead for it, but at the same time, it goes deeper than that. That's why, like, to understand a Donald Trump, you need to understand the last 10,000 years of human monetary systems and economics. Like, he was incentivized by that system. So how do we start incentivizing the opposite of that so that people are winning when they actually help each other rather than when they step on each other? Do you see what I'm saying? We've incentivized competition. We've incentivized somebody having and somebody not having. How do we start to incentivize thinking 7 generations into the future? How do we start to incentivize doing what is the best for the common good? How do we incentivize that? It's an interesting question and worth research, and something that's the next part of what I'm doing here. Chaos witches out there are working overtime. Yes, they are. Let's see. Thousands of years. Yep, exactly. How do we stop evil from ruling this world? Well, that's a great question. I mean, I guess my first response and thought that comes into my mind is taking a look at ourselves in the mirror and see where we are participating in it. That's a good first step, I think. And we all have blind spots like that, you know? And whether we're aware of it or not, how do we, first of all, stop participating in the system that is creating all of that oppression? And some of us are more vulnerable than others. And I think that, I don't know. It's if I had all the answers to that question, I'm sure that I'm just an explorer, Marietta. I'm exploring all those things. I'm trying to figure that out. My current take on it: how do we stop the evil from ruling this world? We start telling new stories. We start understanding different ways of contextualizing what it means to be human, what it means to be successful, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be in power, what it means to be powerful, what it means to be generous. All of those things are up for discussion at this point. And I think that's how we start. I think we start by starting to accept that there are so many different ways of organizing a human species, a global species, organizing life and relationships, not just with humans, but with other sentient beings on this planet, with our ocean friends, with our forest friends, with our river friends, with our trees. How do we start formulating relationships that take all that into account? Marietta says the poor are the most vulnerable, and that's why it keeps us poor. Keep the homeless to scare the shit out of the middle class, as George Carlin said. Yeah, I agree with that. Devin says context of what evil is needs to be agreed upon. Yeah, that's not an easy answer. Devin raises a great point. We can't even agree on who the enemy is sometimes. We all cast ourselves as the hero of our own story. I got to tell you, the people who are wearing the red hats right now and the people that are, playing out the Third Reich's playbook, play by play, they think they're heroes in their own story. They don't necessarily think of what they're doing as evil. Like, if you understand where the fascist mindset comes from, they think what they're doing is cleansing the land for a rebirth. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to be able to understand how each individual centers themselves as a hero and what they are quote unquote fighting against. Now, how do you convince them that they're wrong? Like, we're doing that work right now. We're exploring how we can create a new story. We're exploring that what we've accepted as normal is really dangerous. What we've accepted as comfortable is exploitative. And we thought we were just behaving. And if we just behaved enough in the system, and this, I'm speaking mostly to my white friends out there, okay? Like, because if you're a person of color, you knew from the very get-go that even if you did everything right, and if you behaved yourself, you still could be persecuted, right? This is speaking directly to, you know, the people who have benefited from the system in comfort. Is how do you recognize when being complicit and complacent is actually doing harm? And I'm saying this directly from having a conversation with my own father in the last week about this. A person who, on the surface, really desires not to do harm. He really does. He has a soft, kind heart, but he's also attached to comfort and doesn't make the connection. It is sometimes unwilling to be uncomfortable when faced with the actual truth of what he's doing or what he's participating in. There's a certain part of society, some of them are our parents, some of them are our grandparents, where you had this. Here's one story, okay, where we said, if you just go out and do your job without creating a ruckus, you can have your little slice of Americana. You can have your little house. You can have your little picket fence. You can have your 2 kids and your dog. And if you just cooperate, we'll let you have some little treats every once in a while, right? Well, that sort of worked to keep people complicit for a number of decades. But now even that is being taken away. That isn't even working anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? There's just not even, you can't even uphold that comfort truth anymore. Because the system ultimately will cannibalize itself. And, you know, my father worked a job for like 30 plus years, same job, you know? It wasn't the kind of turnover that it is now. He thought if he just went to work and he worked for an aerospace company, worked for Eaton, which basically makes airplane parts. And he worked in logistics, getting airplane parts to repair commercial airlines. He wasn't working in the military wing of Eaton, but they make military stuff too. And he just kind of probably ignored all that, right? And was like, how do I get airplane parts to where they need to be fixed? And at some level, he wasn't thinking about whether that corporation was part of a system that he didn't agree with or whatnot. He just went to work and did his job and came home and said, I'm doing what I can to support my family. And a lot of people are just doing that. You know, they're just saying, what can I do to show my love to my family through my own stability, etc. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that they were caught up within something that was bigger than them. And now it's being revealed that that whole system, that comfort, was actually hurting people. People of color and women have known this for thousands of years, okay? But the white American male or white women are starting to figure this out. Both of those people are starting to figure this out and say, well, wow, maybe this isn't something that I should keep perpetuating. But everyone's going to come to it on their own. And again, what we've talked about at the very beginning of this is how do we call people into that new story, that new narrative, and say, hey, there's a place for you here. There is a place in fairness, justice, equality, Giving power to someone else doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be oppressed or that you are going to be destitute. Sharing actually uplifts everyone. If we learn how to share on this planet, we will be able to create more abundance for everyone. Okay? We will learn what is truly of value. Those are important questions we're asking. Ouroboros, says Marietta. Yeah. Oftentimes evil starts to consume itself. That was one of the readings I had for 2026 in general. The astrology of 2026 was the Jormungandr, which is an Ouroboros snake in Scandinavian culture. And it was talking about evil consuming itself eventually. When it's fed off of all the good, it starts to consume itself. And this is what we're seeing now, you know. I would also offer, without getting too far down this rabbit hole, because we've still got some ground to cover with Saturn. Part of oh man, I had the thought and it's starting to escape me. I had a good place to go down. We were talking about Ouroboros consuming. Nope, I think it just escaped. Sorry. Oh boy, this is the joys of going on a journey. I was talking about the Jormungandr and the consuming of evil, of consuming itself. Well, it'll come back to me at one of these points. Marietta says there's 239 open era bioweapons testing that went on for 20 years from the 50s to the 70s, conducted by the military in full purview of the government. So they knew at least that. Oh man, I'm sure that people in power knew all sorts of crap that they were doing. I'm talking about, Mariette, I'm talking about individuals in everyday life that have been kind of living in a half stupor, a half asleep kind of way, taking for granted their privilege and taking for granted the comfort that they enjoy at the expense of both people of color, of women, of developing nations, and starting to wake up from that a little bit. Okay, let's talk about Saturn squared the sun here. So this is on July the 6th. And you could see here the sun at 14 degrees Cancer is squaring Saturn at 14 degrees of Aries. So this is the opening square from the conjunction that we saw in March at this point. So this is where we're testing out some of those things. We're going to see Saturn is in the overcoming square to the sun. So it is in a pole position, I guess. It is a place where it has exerting its influence over the sun, which is challenging. I think that this is, since the sun is in Cancer 2, the decan associated with the walled garden, right? The safe spaces, the family, the protective space that we live in. Saturn is going to be in the decan associated with royal decrees. I think this is a test of these new laws, these new royal decrees that have an effect on what we consider safe spaces, what we consider family, etc. I have a unique interest in this aspect because my birthday is the day after this. So this square is going to be baked into my natal chart from similar houses with this arbitrary Leo rising chart here. But excuse me. This is one where I think that the weight of Saturn is going to be pressing on the sun, is going to be making it difficult for us to feel a sense of identity within what is family. What does that mean? There could be people that are saying, well, family is this. They're defining it like this. Family is something else. This could also have to do with motherhood. There could be new laws that are more restrictive around motherhood. One timeline that I hope doesn't come to fruition, I don't even really want to speak it into existence, but if for some reason there's a transition in power from the current president to the current vice president, that person is much more inclined towards Christian nationalism, I think, and conservatism in women's rights. Not that DJT is a bastion of women's rights, but there is I think an even more toxic, I don't know, mindset in the vice president than the president that is a little bit more hidden. But I don't think that all our problems are solved if we have a transition of power from that person to the other individual. I just think it's just changing the mask on something horrible. I don't know. But anyway, I digress. The other thing that could be happening, or that is happening, not could be, but is happening during the Mars Gemini period, is Saturn is going to station retrograde at 14 degrees. So I think the square could be a conflict point. And when we get to the 26th, we are going to see something backtracked. Let's say, for example, here's just one potentiality. Let's say J.D. Vance becomes the president at some point in the next 6 months or whatever. And he has been shown to be much more aggressive about abortion rights, which could be a sun in Cancer type of situation. Maybe he attempts to put forth a national abortion ban or something like that, that people are so upset about, rightfully so, that they are pushing back on it to the point where it's repealed with Saturn turning retrograde in Aries. This is one particular outcome that could happen. Yeah, Rachel says, God, no, Vance terrifies me. Me too. He is a, well, first of all, he is just part of this system. That's why I said, like, you can't just put all your vitriol on one person. They're just figureheads that the system has created. And J.D. Vance is in the pocket of a billionaire named Peter Thiel, and who wants to basically create a surveillance state that is based on Christian nationalism. So it's just out of the frying pan and into the fire type of thing if that transition happens. So I hope it doesn't. I hope that we're able to create a better world around that allows people to have their sovereign individual rights, that allows women to have the rights and decisions with their own bodies. But there's been, if you're afraid of the Handmaid's Tale type of stuff, J.D. Vance is a pretty scary person to be in power. How long is Saturn's retrograde, Javier says? Yes, it goes until December the 10th. So it is going to retrograde from 14 degrees of Aries back to 7 degrees of Aries and station direct on December the 10th. One thing I will say is that, as we alluded to earlier in the broadcast, Saturn, or any planet, has the potential to act in its opposite way from its fall or its exaltation. That's why I was asking Devin earlier about, was Saturn retrograde when the Declaration of Independence was happening? Because that sounds a little bit more like an Aries thing. But is Saturn potentially acting exalted when it is retrograding through Aries? Is this the moment that's galvanizing, that says, no, we're not going to have our rights taken away. We're going to band together and work with each other, or to figure out how to make something more just? I think that there's a possibility for that. The really interesting thing that happened to my family when Saturn turned retrograde last year, and I want you to kind of think about this, because it was between mid-July of 2025 and the beginning of September was a retrograde period of Saturn. My daughter's TikTok exploded, and it had residual benefits for both my channel. I got a lot of subscribers on this channel, and my partner got a lot of business through her Third Coast Mojo. And that seemed to be like Saturn act, and my daughter's a Capricorn sun, so exalted Saturn, like it raised her profile, and it kind of like created this mutually beneficial, almost like Libra network of experience. So this is something to keep an eye on, is will Saturn in its retrograde start maybe bringing potential exalted type benefits? I would keep your eye out for that, because I will say the I-Ching that I got for this, if you stick around towards the end, thank you those of you who have been hanging out with me, it was actually pretty Libran. So I'm curious if that I-Ching is directly related to this potential retrograde acting as its opposite sign. Something to think about. I'm not like 100% certain of all that, but I would, if you want to know where I'm pulling that from, The Science of Light by Freedom Cole is a wonderful textbook on Vedic and Jyotish astrology. And there is text in there that talks about this type of action happening with a retrograde, exalted, or fallen planet acting as its opposite. Let's see. Rose says, Teal Technate of America, they're trying to enact those plans. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, keep your eyes peeled for that. As AI continues to become a part of our reality, there are people that want to use that technology for surveillance state and to quiet dissenting voices. Rachel says, I was at a Bob Ross paint-along event and ended up painting a picture of handmaids escaping. Okay. Did you make a tiny little dress and a tiny little hood? We're gonna have tiny little boots running off into escaping the handmaidens here. This is my best Bob Ross impression. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. How does this whole administration not terrify everybody? I don't know. It does terrify a lot of people, for sure. Okay. I'm going to keep going, friends, because we're getting closer to the 3-hour mark. Your comments are amazing. Thank you for participating in the interaction. I would love to get through and address every single comment. I'm probably not going to be able to address every single thing, but let's keep on rolling. There's a Saturn trine with the sun on the 6th of August. So instead of just looking at all the difficult parts of Saturn, maybe there's a time where there's something positive around this Saturn cycle. And here we have the trine between the Leo sun at 15 degrees of Leo and Saturn at 14 or 15 degrees. So this is a 14-degree trine. Okay. So this is around the 6th. There we go. Yep. Second decan of Leo, associated with authenticity, with victory, with the returning home. Maybe we're experiencing something victorious. Maybe people have pushed back on authoritarian power and experiencing a victory around this period of time. And Jupiter is in the mix, making a trine and softening some of the challenges of Saturn as well. I'm hopeful that could be a beautiful manifestation of that as well in the beginning of August. I think that there could be some good times through August, potentially. We are going to be experiencing a challenging one, though, at the midpoint in August. Okay. Let's see. The midpoint in August, August 11th through September the 27th, is when Mars, the planet that is hosting, is going to move into Cancer. And this sets up a showdown between Mars and Saturn while both of those planets are in their fall. Mars is in its fall in Cancer. Its exaltation is in Capricorn, its opposite sign. Saturn being in its fall in Aries. These are two malefic planets that are acting sort of unstably, right? Being in their fall. And they're going to square one another. So another point of volatility potentially. Before we get to that volatile place, we do have the good news is that Jupiter is involved in this conversation. So if we go to the 31st of August, okay, we have Jupiter making its trine to Saturn. Okay, so Jupiter is trying to intercede via a trine. The day after that, Mars makes the square to Saturn. So I think that this could be worse if Jupiter wasn't attempting to help out. Mercury will also be exalted at this period of time and getting close to its cazimi in Virgo. So there's also other stuff happening that is not necessarily bad. Look at this. So we got Jupiter in its own decan, making a trine to Saturn. We have Mercury coming into cazimi, if it hasn't already. Let me look. Mercury in its exaltation. Okay. What is this? September 1st. We're going to have the Mercury cazimi happening in August 27th. We're coming off of a Mercury cazimi in Virgo. We have Venus hanging out near Spica in its home sign of Libra. So there are mitigating factors. There's also the moon in Taurus, at this time when Mars is making that square. So there's a ton of good dignity. So I don't think that you should look at this time and be like, oh my God, the world's going to end with the Mars-Saturn square because they're both in fall. There's so much other dignity. But there will be some tension between Mars and Saturn. Mars in Cancer can make us feel unsafe in places that we normally would look to for security. It might be that there is some challenges coming from oppressive laws and that affect mothers, that affect women, etc. But there could also be all of these other forces that are helping to mitigate that. So I think that that's one thing to think about with that. But I do think you should be aware of this date, that we have Mars squaring Saturn on September the 1st in the midst of these other more positive experiences. Got some nice comments coming in here. Rachel says, I was trying to relax, but the oracle was coming through. There you go. You're just being authentic with your art. Technate is where Greenland comes from, and Venezuela, etc., etc. Okay. What is technate? I'm not familiar with that term. Somebody explain that to me in the chat. Devin says, did you hear the Bruce Springsteen song about Minnesota? Yeah, the streets of Minneapolis, right? Kind of the take on the streets of Philadelphia. A lot of art coming through as a form of resistance. Yeah, that might be rough for me too, Javier. That's pretty close to my natal sun. Pray for us with Cancer placements around these periods of time. Okay, moving forward. Mars is going to move out of Cancer and into a trine with Saturn in Leo on the 27th of September. It's going to hang out in Leo until November the 25th. So this could be a time where maybe that we're having some potential relief from some of the challenges of the square, where our ability to create new realities. This is something else that I would say that we didn't really discuss with Aries too, second decan of Aries. A lot of the Decanic literature talks about being stuck in a world not of our own creation, with Saturn here. And I think that with Saturn retrograde, we might be questioning the world that we're stuck in and say, do we really want to be stuck in this world? Do we really want to be stuck in this system that has been created for us? Let's see if there's something better. And there might be some ability to take action around that when Mars moves into Leo and makes a trine. Now, this is setting up during this period of time the opposition with the Sun and Saturn. So if we go all the way forward to October the 4th, here we have the Saturn-Sun opposition from Libra, from the fallen Sun to the fallen Saturn. So something coming to a head around October the 4th, right? This is a decan that the Sun is traveling through that is a Saturn-ruled decan. It's associated with oaths and contracts. I think this could be some kind of contractual agreement, maybe even coming to a turning point. Who knows how we're going to get... I've been just thinking about like right now there's funding questions, and we just averted like a government shutdown. What other types of negotiations might we have over the next few months that could make society stop functioning? Like this could be one of those moments potentially too. I would also offer that this is going to be a lead up to an election year in America too. So we're getting close to the election here also. That makes me a little bit nervous. This is also where we have a Venus retrograde in Scorpio happening as well, with Venus and Mars squaring off with one another. So I hope that we are able to continue to have free and fair elections. There's been a lot of blustering about nationalizing the vote, which is an insane overreach of power. Don't let people do that. That's if I got to say, friends, if there's one thing that makes me really, 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 really angry is when people start messing with voting. When people get voting rights taken away, the gerrymandering, the quote unquote nationalization of elections, like trying to make our votes not count. That really, really bothers me. There's some small part of me in my heart that still believes that elections matter, and that if we just vote hard enough, we will be able to change the world. And I will say some of that is true. You still have to do it. You still have to go vote, especially in local elections too, but also in the national elections. But it does seem sometimes that our vote has become more and more marginalized, or the power is taken out of it. I will say this, though. I think it is our responsibility to keep participating. Now, maybe there's a whole different voting system that it can be possible. Maybe ranked choice voting is something. Maybe we need to get past this two-party system where both parties are pretty right of center, in America. But I do think voting is important, and I hope that we are still able to participate in that. Now, Saturn retrogrades back into Aries 1 on the 21st. So here is Saturn retrograding back into the first decan of Aries. Now remember what we've talked about throughout our talk today. Saturn in Aries 1, we talked about rejecting what we are not. Saturn in Aries 2 says, here is our royal decrees. And here's you're bound to it now, right? So we may be having to revisit a rejection of that which we are not. At that Saturn opposition, maybe there's something revealed that says, this is a really corrupt law, or this is a really corrupt system that we live in. Now we're going to go back and reject it again, right? And this happens all the way through the 28th of January of 2027, okay? Because we have a retrograde cycle of Mars that is going to be providing for Saturn, okay? So we have Saturn retrograding in Aries 1, okay? And Saturn stations direct on the 10th of December. I'll get through this, friends. We're getting into hour 3 here, okay? Bear with me. But Saturn will be in Aries 1 from the 21st of October to the 28th of January. Not necessarily retrograde that whole time, but it won't move back into Aries 2 until the 28th of January. Does that make sense? Okay. But let's talk about Mars and Virgo, because between the 25th and the 21st, now I kind of glossed over Election Day. Election Day is what, the 3rd? So on Election Day, Saturn's back into Aries 1. Mars is in Leo. Jupiter's in Leo, the South Node in Leo. We've got a retrograde Venus in Libra, a retrograde Mercury in Scorpio that's about to cazimi. I don't have any huge predictions for that. I just want to give you the kind of the lay of the land for Election Day, because it is a pretty big day moving forward. Mars in Virgo is interesting because it's going to be in Virgo for quite some time. It's going to be in Virgo from the 25th of November and it won't leave Virgo until the 21st of February of 2027. It is going to retrograde back into Leo, okay? 20 degrees Leo is where it starts moving direct again. So we have this retrograde where Mars is going to retrograde all the way back over Donald Trump's Mars at 26 degrees of Leo too. So keep that in mind, that he will be part of that story one way or the other. But we have a Saturn Sun trine on the 30th. Okay, so here's the 30th. Okay, Saturn is in aversion to Mars during this whole time, right? During this whole time, there's this disconnect between those two planets, its host. So here is the Sun-Saturn trine, okay? And it's coming from Sagittarius to Aries. Important messages coming around that period of time because the sun is moving through Sagittarius 1. The Eight of Wands card is associated with that. Potentially like propaganda as well. Like this is us trying to be convinced of something, of sharing something passionately, trying to convince someone of your point of view. Those are themes that are associated with that. Saturn stations direct on December the 10th. So here's December the 10th. Okay, this is Saturn stationing direct on the same degree. Remember very early in our broadcast 3 weeks ago where we had Mars conjoining Saturn and Mercury at 7 degrees of Aries. So look back to that point. If you're looking back on this video, it would be an honor if you did, but if you're looking back on it in December, say, okay, let's go back to that conjunction of Mars and Saturn and Mercury in late April to see what ground we're now breaking again, okay, that we've gone back and traveled back to. The sun will square Saturn on the 29th of December from Capricorn. So this is our closing square, getting ready for the renewal of the Saturn in the heart of the sun again in 2027. Okay, so this is a release period. Okay, the first square is trying to bring something into being. This is a period where we're releasing something. And then Mars is going to retrograde from the 10th of January and station direct on April the 1st of 2027. Okay, so Mars retrograde is going to be 10 degrees Virgo to 20 degrees of Leo. And that's important because we're going to be seeing things slow down with all of this, up for review. We've got Saturn stationing direct, but Mars is retrograde. So its host is reviewing things. So tracking the cycle of Mars throughout the year is going to give us a lot of insight as to what Saturn and Aries might be focusing on during these different periods of time. So that's why I did it like this. Saturn is going to be in Aries for quite some time. I'm not going to go through 2027. We've already gone 3 hours today. But I will say that Saturn does move into Taurus on April the 12th of 2028. So we've got some time to marinate in all of these themes. And eventually maybe we'll take Saturn through 2027, but this will at least prepare you for the year ahead. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you. I've got an I-Ching and an animal. I'm just going to check in back in the chat here. Devin says, hopefully Mamdani can lead the way to re-inspire the vote, but capitalism needs to fall. Yeah, I was seeing some really important information out of Mamdani's first month as mayor of New York with his democratic socialism platform, and crime across the board has been down in New York. All sorts of violent crime, gun crime, murders, all down since he's taken over. I think it's really interesting that when you actually give people what they need to live, they don't feel the need to take it from other people. So this is something to think about sharing, is if you want to create a more fair and just and safer society, actually sharing with people is the way forward, because people won't feel the need to become criminal in that way because they have enough. They don't feel desperate enough to commit those types of crimes. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's amazing how that works. Now, that doesn't mean it'll eliminate all of those things completely, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. And I am curious to see how we can follow New York's example in that regard. Okay, friends, the hexagram that I got, surprising. It's surprise. I saw this and I was like, whoa, that's interesting. It was hexagram number 11, peace with no changing lines, where we have the yin on top of the yang, equally balanced, which seems so counterintuitive for Saturn and Aries. But it made me really question what the retrograde period might be bringing us. So this translates to harmony, peace, prosperity, smoothly flowing, the union of high and low, harmonious interaction, things going well, advance. Tai, the name of this hexagram, says peace, the petty depart, the great arrive, good fortune, success. Maybe this is just a whole new way of organizing society. Maybe this is the last gasp of the capitalism, the patriarchy, of exploitative power games. Maybe we're actually stepping into something new that could be beautiful and wonderful. The hexagram says this hexagram represents a time of great prosperity and concord. Heaven and earth operate together happily and effortlessly. The high act in harmony with the low, the strong with the weak, and the great with the small. Progressive forces make great strides. Worthy elements advance without obstacle. People of talent, ability, and wisdom obtain the respect due to them, and others work with them freely and happily without envy or rancor. Those who join in are honored and respected in turn for their contributions. Peace descends on the world, and everything flows smoothly and easily. It seems indeed as if heaven were on earth. During this period, your relationships with others become more congenial. Old problems will be resolved. New intimacies will develop. Cooperation and coordination becomes easier and almost effortless. You can begin new projects with confidence, and the ones you are currently pursuing will blossom. If you make the effort and devote yourself to achieving your goals now, you will flourish and prosper. I mean, that is really surprising. Not something I would have expected. The image is heaven and earth unite. This is the image of peace. Thus, the great prince acts to fulfill the Tao of heaven and earth, supports their harmonious interaction, and so aids the people. So this to me is interesting, because when we talk about Taoist philosophy, sometimes we need things to get to an extreme for the opposite to be born. And we have an extreme of inequality, of violence, we have been experiencing the worst of the worst of humanity in the last few weeks and months, etc. Maybe that's planting the seed for the best in humanity. You know, one of my favorite human beings on this planet, Fred Rogers, used to say, look for the helpers. What is being born through this hardship? What new seeds of justice and fairness and cooperation are being born through this? That example of people coming together and singing people back into community, singing ICE agents back into the heart and the womb, is an example of this beauty that is born out of this horrific event. I mean, that was beautiful to me. Like, as much as I hate and dislike the actions of the people who are perpetrating that violence on the members of our immigrant community and just citizens in general, the compassion even for people who have gone astray and into isolation and are acting from that place of ignorance, that still gave me hope and faith that we can come together as a community and that there is a way to heal this. The people that are perpetrating these things are so broken. They have to heal. The stories that they consume have to heal for them to not just be replaced by some other person who takes on that narrative further down the road. We have to not just dismantle the people in power. It's not going to stop with a Trump or a Vance or a Thiel or a Bezos or a Musk. It's going to stop when we dismantle the narratives that have created the incentive for those people to pursue those means to power, to hoarding, to stopping the flow of abundance to everyone, and thinking that they have to have more and more and more to fill the emptiness that they feel in their hearts. that can never be filled by the monetization of common resources, communal good, of nature, of turning trees and ocean into quantifiable numbers on a ledger. It will never be enough, because those aren't the types of things that create peace of mind, that create stability. There will never be enough for people who are pursuing wealth as an end rather than just as a means of exchange. So how do we start bringing those people back in and say, hey, you know what? There's something different. Do you want to fill that hole in your soul? It's through love. It's through song. It's through art. It's through appreciating the beauty on this planet. It's through appreciating these beautiful whales, these beautiful trees, these seals, right? Shout out to my daughter, who has been having dreams about selkies lately. She had a dream about Hermes saying, "Hello, selkie," which is so cool. How do we push back on authoritarianism, push back on oppression, while simultaneously showing how beautiful the world can be by creating a new narrative, by creating community, by sharing with one another our gifts and appreciating other people's gifts and leaving space for them to come back into the fold? So powerful. I mean, it's the only way, in my opinion. Everyone's going to have a different role within this. There are going to be people that are much better at holding power's feet to the flame. There's going to be other people whose role is to really give an emotional showing of the beauty on this earth. Equally valid roles within this changing story. But I do think that we have to be able to see a new vision, and one where it's in alignment and harmony with this beautiful, amazing, generous planet that we are lovers with, that we're not just children of. This is the story that's changing, that makes me feel a recognition. We're not just being nurtured and suckled by this earth anymore. We have to become lovers of this earth. Like David Attenborough. You can hear David Attenborough in every documentary he does. You can see that he is such a lover of this planet. And when we become lovers of the planet rather than just children of it, we care what happens to it, because we know that what happens to them happens to us. You know, we care about how we treat it. In a healthy relationship, we are equals. We are not just taking. That to me is what this hexagram means throughout this change that we're going through. Rose says it's always darkest before the light. I agree, right? I think, Rose, a lot of times human beings, we're creatures of comfort and habit. And when we start to get uncomfortable enough to make a change, that's when real change happens. So I really believe in that yin and yang symbol that shows us that at the extremes of darkness, light is born. We have to hold on to that moving forward, and that will bring about peace and balance. Now, there's one more symbol I have for you. This is one that I haven't gotten before. It's the silkworm, right? Look at this beautiful little creature. Silkworm. I'm going to read to you from Animal Frequency about the silkworm. Let's talk about it. Let me find it here. So silkworm symbolizes moving from darkness to the light. Rose, look at what you did here. It's always darkest before the light. You had a premonition, a beautiful one, right? Silkworm symbolizes moving from the darkness to the light, transformation and intuition. Silkworm goes through several phases to transform into the silk moth. In the larval stage, the silkworm is ravenous and eats mulberry leaves constantly. It will shed its skin 4 times before creating a cocoon made of raw silk from its salivatory glands. From this cocoon, the adult silk moth emerges. Silk is harvested at the cocoon stage for commercial uses. It has a talent for allure, attraction, concealment, determination, dreaming, faith, finding light in the dark, healing abilities, inner knowing, intuition, movement, otherworldliness, power of suggestion, psychic awareness, secret knowledge, subtlety, transformation, and vulnerability. It has challenges with disguise, hiding, and shadows. When silkworm appears, it means that you're being healed from the inside out. You may not even be aware of the changes happening within you, but you are growing and developing, transforming into a beautiful being filled with intuition, faith, and the uncanny ability to find light in the darkest of nights. When you realize the changes you've made, it will come as a surprise, but you will feel as if you are one with the secret knowledge of the universe. Silkworm means you will attract like-minded individuals to your calm serenity. You may begin to experience deeper intuitive impressions, powerful dreams, and strong psychic abilities. Silkworm reminds you that difficult situations always pass in time, and it is up to you to see the beauty in the outcome. Silkworm works in silence and then awakens as a beautiful new being. You are doing the same right now. Let silkworm guide you to the light. Silkworm can lay 300 to 400 eggs at a time. This indicates that anything you attempt right now will be fertile and successful. Silkworm warns against hiding from your own emotions. Don't hide your feelings away, but instead deal with them in the now. How you handle the moments of your life will always affect your personal and spiritual growth. Deal with emotions now to avoid a meltdown later. Silkworm reminds you to do for yourself instead of letting others take care of your needs. When you give someone else complete power and control over your care, you could ultimately lose the ability to care for yourself. That sounds very Saturn and Aries to me. This animal assists you when you need to be more creative. Silkworm means you have the capability of seeing situations from your own unique perspective. You come up with innovative solutions to problems that others may not see. Silkworm can help you find the silver linings in every situation. Where others may see only darkness and negativity, you always see light and positivity. You listen closely to what is being said and are able to intuit secret knowledge hidden within words and emotions. When you're experiencing complications, you remain calm, focused, and determined. You have faith things will work out as they should, so you continue moving forward with hope and joy. Silkworm can help you feel more confident when your self-esteem is low. It will show you the positive qualities that make you so popular and endearing to others, which you may have forgotten. While you don't like to toot your own horn, there are times when you have to recognize your strengths and the positive impact you make on others so that you can move forward on your path. Silkworm energy sounds like a soft, delicate, faraway chewing noise. It feels cool and supple and silky. It spins around you at a slow pace, wrapping you in the warmth of a cocoon, where you can grow and transform into the beautiful essence of your soul. Maybe this is a cocoon period, friends. Maybe something new is being born. Maybe that something new is beautiful. Maybe we need to experience the beauty of duality to be able to see where we need to moving forward. I just think it's so awesome that Rose was so prescient about that moving forward. I mean, how cool is that? That right before we revealed the silkworm, Rose was like, it's always darkest before the light. So many synchronicities that happen with these animals, with the I-Ching, with just our connections with one another. Don't ever discount those intuitive feelings, friends. We are connected in ways that we don't even fully understand yet. And to me, that's super, super exciting. All right. Marietta says, silkworms blow their silk all over here in central Illinois in the autumn. I bet it's very beautiful, right? It's very cool. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Do me a huge favor. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, go support Third Coast Mojo. There's all sorts of cool new offerings over there, all sorts of great stuff coming out. Support my beautiful daughter, Sag Moon Magic, on Instagram and TikTok. Sign up for a reading if you need some help. I've got all sorts of availability for February and March. I would love to be able to work with you on an individual basis. Don't be shy about shining your light and sharing how beautiful the world is, as well as calling out the challenging things too. find balance between that. Always, always remember that Saturn is a planet of nemesis. It is a planet that increases that which is lacking and decreases that which is excessive. How do we increase our experience of beauty on this planet when we see the lack of it? That's how we can be good children of Kronos, children of Saturn. If all we see is horrifying things happen, we need to bring more of that light into the world and be responsible for doing so. And everyone has their place. Everyone has their role. And you don't have to do it alone. This is the final thing I'll leave you with. You don't have to do this alone. As much as Neptune and Saturn may be making it feel like you do, that is an illusion. And we are stronger together, and we overcome and create this beautiful new world together. All right, my friends. Go follow me over at Spencer Michaud on my social medias. Check me out at spencermichaud.com. Remember to be kind to one another. You might feel really angry and fired up. Do something positive with that. Create new relationships in your life. Create new organizations of mutual aid. Help your neighbor. Create all of these communal things with that fire, right? Use that fire for good, okay? All right. Thank you, friends. Thank you for being here today. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. We'll see you the next time. Peace.